like to call to order the regular Township Board meeting of Chesterfield Township for December 21st, 2021 at 7 p.m. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Clerk Berry, please call roll.
Supervisor Kersten.
Here.
Treasurer Elliott.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Joseph.
Here.
Trustee Demink.
Here.
Trustee Vosberg.
Here.
Clerk Berry is here.
Item 4, approval of the agenda. Clerk Berry.
Item A, approval of the agenda with addendum if necessary.
So move.
Support. Motion by Anderson, Trustee Anderson, supported by Trustee Joseph. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 5, presentations. Deputy Duchesne. Deputy Duchesne or Treasurer Elliott? You're up first. Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So the good news is we've seen an increase in CD rates in well over a year. We are finally able to invest some of the township funds in CDs that are paying closer to 1%. The township offices will be closed to the public from the 23rd for the holiday break. Next slide, please, Karen. For your convenience, we'll have the drop box out front. Please do not put cash in the drop box. We will be here checking that on Tuesday the 28th and also on Wednesday the 29th. There will be, the township will have the phones will be on, and we will be here to answer any questions if you need. Next slide. During that time, if you'd like to make a cash tax or water and sewer bill payment that is accepted at First State Bank, they will accept any form of payment there. There is a convenient location on Gratiot at north of 24 Mile, but you can make a payment at any of the First State Bank branches, even through their drive-through. We can also easily pay your tax and water and sewer bills online by EFT check with no service fee. The first thing you want to do is go to the website and click on the payment button. And you'll see that down as you're scrolling down towards the bottom of the website. And then that'll take you to a place called the BS&A online lookup system. And this is all the municipalities. You can do this at any municipality. You can look up by your name, your address, or your parcel number. And then that'll take you to a place where you can select how you would like to pay. And for the no service fee option, click on EFT check. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you, Treasurer Elliott. Deputy Duchesne.
Good evening. This is the last progress report for 2021. As you can see, it's published on the website and copies are available here at the township offices. Some of the important things I want to just briefly highlight and not read all of them is a reminder again that in snow plowing situations, the Township of Chesterfield is not responsible for removing snow on any roads. The Macomb County Road Division maintains all the public roads in the township during the winter and summer seasons. Any questions can be referred to the Macomb County Road Division. As far as projects go, in December, of course, it concludes a construction season with highlighted in the report is the Civic Center Bridge reconstruction, the Demink Anchor Bay Pump Station study, which has come to a conclusion, initial work on the Peggy Lane Water Main project and the Jefferson Avenue Water Main projects in Phase 1. The Sidewalk Gap program of 2021 is concluded, and the 22 Sidewalk Gap program is being developed in design. That information is again important to note in the map that describes what the 5 or 6 districts are for the sidewalk program. Continuing the progress report and the township update building reports, it's challenging to read this way, so I'll just summarize that the building official indicates that we'll conclude 2021 with over 250 residential permits being issued this year. Additional construction in commercial and others areas are all highlighted in the building report, and the progress report is consistent through November 30th, so there will be some updates to finalize the year. The monthly service metric dashboard also provides some useful information regarding the number of activities. For example, the number of water main breaks, code enforcement actions completed, how many active residential meters are, so that people understand the impact of the financial decisions on what the actual operations of the community are. In that metric service dashboard, it provides 3 primary goals, and we report on those in the metric dashboard the various departments do. And the last part of that, the Chesterfield Police Department's November dashboard is included now in the progress report, and that is also available on the website for further review if those choose to do so. My next topic is I reported last week on a bill reducing personal property tax reimbursement for local governments. Unfortunately, despite opposition from the Michigan Townships Association, the Michigan Municipal League, and the Michigan Association of Counties, it did pass. The MTA is going to reach out to members, and I hope all will participate in discussions on how to replace the upcoming revenue to townships since the passage of this bill. Again, the bill passed, and that's fine, and a reduction in personal property tax is fine, as long as the state of Michigan's budget pays for it and not locals. And the next positive report I'd like to share is the results of several years of work. The board has been instituting self-funding for OPEB or other post-employment benefit. And as the board has received this week new results of the actuarial review, which now places our funded ratio at 115%. That's an outstanding position to be in, and proper, obviously, takes the liabilities for OPEB, as we refer to them. It's measured versus the amount of cash available and the projected funding and the interest earnings. So this is a compliment to the board that began the self-funding options and going in the positive direction to pay your bills first. And lastly, pleased to congratulate Township Assessor Carrie Beauvais. The State Tax Commission does an audit on assessing practices, and it recently sent to the supervisor the recognition for an outstanding achievement of receiving a perfect score on the 2021 audit of minimum assessing requirements, or AMAR review. And they wish to congratulate her and the township for doing so. And if she is here, we have a certificate to present to her. If she is here, there she is. That's an extremely positive achievement, and after years of knowing the practice, significantly difficult to achieve and maintain. And that, Mr. Supervisor's report for tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Duchesne. I apologize. Trustee Joseph.
I just have one update for the board. As I indicated last week, the final Selfridge Sustainability Study meeting as it applies to the technical work group. If you recall, the sustainability study, which the county entered into with the base, began over 18 months ago. The idea was to look at the compatibility of the Selfridge operations with the surrounding communities. Very early on, members of the Chesterfield delegation indicated that Chesterfield is very uniquely positioned as it relates to the base because all base operations really dramatically impact Chesterfield more than any other community. So what I mean by that is St. Clair Shores is part of the sustainability study work group, and they're not dealing with flight path operations or any potential restrictions on building or development on the, as we have on the south end of our township. So Harrison Township was indicated as one of the, I guess, super partners, and so they were given a few extra delegates to participate, as was Chesterfield. We've met several times, and each time, I think in a nutshell, I've been very concerned about what the possible restructuring of the base looks like for Chesterfield, specifically the quality of life for the residents near the base, and also the development opportunities near the base. As anybody in the audience probably is aware, everyone is aware, the biggest development that we have in the township is at the south end of the township between Hall Road and 21 Mile Road, right on 94, that being the Cabela's and Home Goods and BJ's. That is a 200-acre parcel that is really in the infancy of its development. And the developer who was handling that project was part of this sustainability study work group. And as the presenter was going over all of the details in the sustainability group, this developer began to ask questions and felt very frustrated by the process, specifically that concerns about his ability to develop that property were being dramatically impacted and even hampered. We have, over the past year or so, had a number of residents that have come to the podium and talked about the expansion or the reconfiguration of the runway and possible restrictions and problems for us. And they've referred to the expansion of the base or the aerial problem zones, or affectionately referred to as the crash box, which extends out past the base and into residential neighborhoods. And the expansion of that were concerning. We had residents that came forward and said they were worried about possible expansion, creating a eminent domain type situation, or really an annexation of a portion of our township. During my opportunity to weigh in, I shared the residents' concerns, and I reminded the organizers, including members of the county, the economic development team director was there. In short, she didn't particularly appreciate the concerns about annexation or eminent domain, and actually referred to those comments as reckless. And I explained to her that these are the comments that come from concerned residents about what their quality of life will be, and calling things like noise pollution a noise level that is really not compatible for living next to. Decibel levels so high that it impacts the quality of life cannot simply just be referred to as a noise contour, and that we post a sign near the base alerting people to noise contours, that there were concerns about property values. There were a number of things that had not been answered during the process. And I also reminded the group that I had asked for a town hall meeting to take place in Chesterfield Township. And I was told, well, there was ample opportunity for all residents of Macomb County to weigh in during the public input portion of this study. And I assured the individuals that I'm part of the group, and I don't know when the public input portion opened and closed. And what I do know is that we have a need to dispel rumors, to set the record straight, and that could only occur by base personnel or members sort of inside the gate coming to Chesterfield Township, where we are the most impacted community in the county. It wasn't an ideal back and forth, but what did happen was after the meeting, I was contacted by the Economic Development Coordinator who would like to meet with me Mr. Costello reached out to Supervisor Kersten. Mr. Costello is the developer on the Town Center project, and set up some times and dates beginning of the year for that team to come in and conduct a town hall or a public meeting so that residents have ample opportunity to have questions answered by those who know what's really going on. And that will take place, we're looking to meet the 1st of January, first couple of weeks of January, and I will report back to the board when we have some tentative dates for a town hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Joseph. Clerk Barry?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. We'd just like the public to be aware that passport processing in the clerk's office will be unavailable from this Thursday, the 23rd, the 23rd through January 3rd. We will reopen for passport processing when the township reopens on January the 3rd, which is Monday. Would also like to make everyone available for those who are planning your holiday travel and you are in need of a passport. Passport processing can take up to 12 weeks now in the COVID environment. So please be sure to get in soon. An expedited passport will cost an extra $60, but that only speeds it up by a few weeks. It can still take up to 2 months to receive an expedited passport. So please be aware of that. The township will be holding a late night passport opportunity for those who cannot come to the office during regular business hours. That opportunity will be, the next opportunity will be on January the 13th. So please keep that in mind as well. Once we receive all of your passport information here, once we send it to the Department of State, the clerk's office has no control over the timing. So please be aware of that as well. In addition to that, from the Elections Department, for those who still have questions about their voting history, that voting history is available through the website. Please go to the Elections page and you can choose to have your personal voting history sent to you via email, regular mail, or you may pick it up in our office. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Barry. Just a comment from the Supervisor's office. We have identified a public safety director candidate. We will be meeting with him sometime through, beginning tomorrow. And my hope is that we'll schedule meetings with individual trustees and board members to introduce him, and then we'll sit down and negotiate that process. My hope is to have a presentation for this board seeking approval for that candidate should we come to agreements in the first January meeting. Department reports. Item 6. I see no department reports. Item 7. Clerk Barry, consent agenda.
All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on consent agenda items are permitted. 7A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of December 14th, 2021. 7B, authorize the Township Supervisor to sign the acceptance of discharge and removal of covenant to run with land in connection with property owned by Chesterfield Holdings, L.L.C. Parcel ID number 1509321261010. 7C, approval of the payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department.
Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
Mr. Supervisor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as
Support.
submitted.
Motion by Clerk Barry, second by Trustee Luster.
Elliott.
Elliott, Treasurer Elliott. Clerk Barry, call the roll.
Ask for
I'm
discussion.
sorry. Public comments. One day I'll get that right.
And then you can ask for discussion from the board as well.
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. Just a couple items that were problematic for me that maybe the board could explain. Under the bill run, under facilities and operations, I noticed that we got charged, there were 3 charges from Ultima Lawn Services for snow removal. I was under the impression when we approved the contract that they were gonna do the snow plowing, and our guys here were gonna take care of the salting. So I come up with the total of $2,300. They did the fire department, DPW, and the police department were the three charges. So somebody can give me some clarification on that, I would appreciate it. The other thing that was problematic for me was I noticed that under Brandenburg Park Fund, OEM charged us $12,140. Maybe the clerk can answer that because she's supposed to go through the bills before they're approved. I thought we were done with any projects going on at Brandenburg Park, so I don't understand how that charge came through unless we're starting something new that I'm not aware of. And then under water and sewer, I noticed that there were a couple of monitor TV mounts that were charged. And my understanding is that's a water and sewer fund. That's an inappropriate charge to that department. That's it. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public? I'll bring it up to the board. Comments from the board? Have a motion by Clerk Barry, supported by Treasurer Elliott. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Clerk Barry, aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 8, public hearings. There are no public hearings. Item 9, regular agenda. Item 9A. Clerk Barry.
Item 9A is a presentation and discussion of draft Chesterfield Township Marijuana Establishments Ordinances.
On this item, the attorney was requested to present and discuss a draft Chesterfield Township Marijuana Ordinance. With that being said, I will defer to our,
Mr. Supervisor, before he reviews that, I'd like to make a motion.
I'd make a motion to open discussion and presentation.
I have a-
Treasurer Vosberg, Trustee Vosberg, please make the motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to not consider not consider this marijuana establishment ordinance, and to continue to uphold our current policy, which is to opt out until voters tell us otherwise.
Support.
Mr. Supervisor, a point of order. There is no board agenda item the opportunity to remove an agenda item happened during the consent agenda. We approve the agenda. This is not an action item. This is a presentation and discussion. There is no motion to take any board action. So it is not an appropriate motion from a parliamentary procedure standpoint in that it is not an action item, and the motion maker actually voted yes to approve the agenda item in her vote in the affirmative for the regular agenda. In essence, it's not subject to approval or it already happened in the agenda passage.
So in conferring with council, the options that you have would be a motion to table or on this agenda item at this point.
Can be a motion to postpone. And I'll tell you why. Because a motion to table stops discussion, is my understanding.
Is this a motion to postpone it indefinitely?
Yes.
Go ahead, that's a proper motion.
But I'm asking the question, if you use a motion to table, does that stop discussion? I believe there's people here that would like to speak.
If you're going to make, well, there's still a public comment. You can still have public comment.
Still have public, okay.
Under your rules of procedure, members of the public, if pursuant to your rules of procedure, members of the public have the right to speak for 3 minutes on every agenda item. This is an agenda item. If you're making a motion to table it indefinitely, that would be a proper motion if there's a second. But before there's a vote, there would be board discussion and members of the public would have an opportunity to speak.
Just for clarification, they'd have an opportunity to speak on the motion, not on the presentation, which they don't hear. I'm terribly confused why we don't want to hear from our residents,
I
but
do want to hear from the
Is there-
residents, and I want to hear what this draft is. I want to hear all of it.
that's what agenda item A is, Ms.
But
Motion
but
Maker.
I'm also saying that I don't want us to approve it.
Well,
You don't want to approve a discussion that you'd like to have.
No, stop it. You
That's
know
what you just said.
No, that's,
You'd like to
But-
hear from the residents, but you don't want to have the agenda item which says, let's hear from the residents.
Supervisor,
Trustee Joe, hold on.
I'm just terribly confused about the motion itself. So if there's a motion to postpone, I'd ask the motion maker to make her motion,
continued
makes
support
sense.
for the motion.
for what? Can we have the motion maker say?
She made a motion to
You're out of
table.
order. I'm asking the
And
motion.
you're not?
I'm asking the chair. I'm asking, Mr. Chairman, it really is just a parliamentary procedure. I'm asking the motion maker to clarify the motion. That's all.
Trustee Vosberg, would you clarify the motion on whether or not you want to adjourn or table this item? According to our APOs, tabling it removes it indefinitely, and the items are placed back on the agenda with a 2/3 vote of this board. If you want to hear the presentation, the attorney should or could give the presentation as directed, and then at that point, a motion could be made.
all right, proceed with the presentation. I just wanted, that's fine. If I could have an
I
opportunity to
understand
make a
where-
motion at the end of his presentation then.
Correct.
Thank you.
To be clear, this agenda item was set up as a presentation and a discussion only. The way this agenda item was phrased, it was not phrased as an action item to do anything. It was an item to simply have me present to the board the ordinance that you directed me to draft. And when we're done with that presentation and discussion and input from the public, at that point, there is no action to be taken at that point. It's not an approval of the ordinance. It's not accepting it for first publication. It's not doing anything. This presentation, quite frankly, is no different than the one that Trustee Joseph and Clerk Barry just gave under board presentations. That's all it is. There's no action to be taken.
Mr. Supervisor, may I respond? I'm sorry to make this last so long. I'm fully aware that what the agenda stated in the packet is the presentation, but I want to turn it into an action item, and that's why I made my original motion.
Understood.
Mr. Supervisor,
Trustee Joseph.
for clarification, I am unaware of any intent to turn this discussion into an action item. And if it calms down the motion maker and her assistant, I'm really interested in hearing from the residents tonight, as I hope you are. And that's the extent of this agenda item for me. And I'm unaware of any support for any action item because simply put, the township isn't prepared to move forward with such a thing.
Thank you, sir. Council, can we proceed with the presentation if isn't any objections?
Nobody's objected to it.
Correct.
You want me to do it from here, or do you want me to do it from up there?
Totally up to you.
All right. This matters before the board tonight pursuant to your direction back in July of this year. As the board will recall, a cannabis committee was put together by this board and met over the course of a year or two and made a presentation to the board. The township has, you know what, I'm going to use the podium because I'm looking at the board and it's difficult to do it this way.
Thank you.
All right, this is better. Back in July 13th of this year, the board had directed me, as well as your planning director and your planning consultant, to put together two independent but cohesive ordinances. One was a regulatory ordinance with respect to marijuana establishments in Chesterfield Township. The other was a zoning ordinance amendment, which, if the board approved, would allow marijuana establishments within certain districts in the township. Since that time, the planning director, Jonathan Palin, your planning consultant, Rod Arroyo, and his colleague, and I have met on several occasions. The board will recall that when you directed us to meet, there was no direction that was given by the board. It was simply to prepare a packet of 2 ordinances for your review at a subsequent date and for your consideration. It's important to remember what this ordinance is not about. This is not about medical marijuana. This is not about caregiver operations. This is about marijuana establishments under the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, which is referred to as the recreational statute. This was voted by the voters of the state of Michigan in 2018. It in its essence regulates the use and production of marijuana by individuals 21 years old or older. The statute itself afforded municipalities the opportunity to limit the number of marijuana establishments within their community or to ban them entirely. The vast majority of municipalities in the state of Michigan have banned marijuana establishments throughout their municipal boundaries. The number continues to vary, but it's in the area of 1,400 to 1,500 municipalities have banned these establishments. You had the option to either ban them or limit them, and you adopted an ordinance back several years ago which completely banned marijuana establishments. So unless you take affirmative action at some subsequent date, they will no longer be allowed in the township. When we originally met to put together these ordinances, I took the position that a merit system of allowing limited numbers of marijuana establishments was unworkable and likely unenforceable. So I took the position that if an ordinance was going to be upheld, if challenged, we would have an unlimited number of marijuana establishments in the township. So with that basis, Mr. Arroyo and Mr. Palin began to draft a zoning ordinance amendment which would designate certain areas of the township within which these establishments could be placed. The regulatory ordinance, which is all we're considering this evening, would permit every single type of marijuana establishment in the light manufacturing district and in the light manufacturing district only. The ordinance is set up so that there is a regulatory scheme that would require an applicant to obtain a license from Chesterfield Township Clerk in an unlimited number for each establishment. The way the ordinance is set up is that the applicant would first be required to obtain a license to the state of Michigan. That's a precondition anyway, but our team decided that before they come to the clerk's office, they have to have the state license in hand. The state license is presented to the clerk's office. The application that we will have to prepare in the future if this is adopted will set forth the requirements that they have to satisfy. They will have to obtain zoning compliance, which will require a site plan from the Chesterfield Township Planning Commission. They will have to submit appropriate security plans, ventilation plans, lighting plans, and the like to the various department heads, your building department, your zoning department. They will have to obtain all of those approvals before they can start any sort of operation. If all of those are submitted, they obtain their zoning compliance permit, they obtain a certificate of occupancy, they will then be issued a license. The license has a 1-year shelf life. That is compatible with the state license that's issued by LARA that also is for a 1-year period. The license must be renewed annually 45 days before expiration. If it is not renewed, then it will expire, and the applicant will have to resubmit an application for that facility. I have put what I refer to as due process provisions in the regulatory ordinance, which indicate that if your license is revoked or suspended at any time, that there has to be due process. If the township clerk's office determines that there are violations of the license, that license can be suspended. But first, there have to be notice provisions. They have to be provided with written notice of violations. They have to be given an opportunity to cure. If the applicant still does not satisfy the clerk's office of violations, and parenthetically, these violations are unlikely to come from independent investigation by the clerk's office. They're going to come from your zoning department, your building department, or your public safety department. Once those violations are noted and the clerk decides that there have been sufficient documentation that there's violations, they'll be given notice of suspension. The applicant has an opportunity to challenge it. If they still do not satisfy the township, there is an appeal to the township board, and you will make the ultimate determination as to whether or not there's a basis for a suspension or revocation of that license. There's references in this regulatory ordinance to the zoning ordinance with respect to the lighting, the ventilation plan, the security plan, and the like. The reason that we did not put a limitation in the number is because the communities that have had limitations on numbers of establishments and have been challenged have not been successful. And by way of example, there was a decision that came out of the United States District Court in Detroit this summer, in July, where the city of Detroit had adopted an ordinance much like the one that you're considering, and they had put limitations on the number of establishments, and they had come up with what they thought were objective criteria for whether or not an applicant should be preferred over another. So for instance, if you said you can only have 20 dispensaries and you get an application for 100, you got to whittle down 100 people down to 20, and there's got to be a set of criteria that we think would be enforceable. The city of Detroit, as one of their criteria, placed residency and gave favorable merit to residents of the city of Detroit that had lived there up to 15 years as opposed to other applicants. And a group of people in the industry challenged it in federal court. The federal court, in a preliminary hearing, found that there is a very good likelihood that that is unconstitutional and is a violation of equal protection both under the federal and Michigan Constitution, and a preliminary injunction was issued staying the enforcement of that ordinance. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to put you in a position where if there's support for this, you adopt an ordinance that we're defending in court for the next 2 years. That gets you nowhere. I want to draft an ordinance for you that I'm satisfied will withstand legal challenge. And so to do that, we put in an unlimited number. The kind of safety net on that is we didn't allow them all over the township. We didn't say any commercial zone, any manufacturing zone. We said it's going to be limited to the light manufacturing. The rationale for that, I will have to defer to your planner and your planning consultant on. They worked on that as well, and that was their recommendation. We talked about the light manufacturing and heavy industrial. It was their recommendation, because there was more than adequate property in the township zoned light industrial, that would be more than sufficient. So when they went and drafted the zoning ordinance amendment, they drafted it so that it will be limited only to those zones. So while on the one hand, it's unlimited in number, and you're thinking, well, that's good, we're going to have one on every corner, that is tempered by the fact that they're only going to be in the light industrial. Every establishment will have to have their own license. We're not in a situation where you can have one owner that has 3 or 4 establishments under a single roof, and they're going to get one license. They each have to have their own license. Without getting into the zoning ordinance, because that's not to you yet, that zoning ordinance is going to have to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. They're going to have to hold a public hearing, and the Planning Commission will come back to you with a recommendation. There are distance requirements, and there's some pretty heavy barriers to getting these facilities constructed and up and running. That's a broad overview of the regulatory ordinance. Bear in mind that this ordinance in and of itself, without a zoning ordinance component, is meaningless. Because if you can't do it tonight, but if you did adopt first publication, which is not up tonight, and you adopted it for second publication at an upcoming meeting, and you had a regulatory ordinance in place which allowed the marijuana establishments, it means nothing. You don't have a zone in the township where your zoning ordinance allows it. So that zoning ordinance component is critical. Both of these have to go hand in hand. Now, ultimately, that zoning ordinance amendment is going to be reviewed and approved by this board. So you're going to have the last say, but it's still under the Township Zoning Enabling Act, going to have to receive a full-blown public hearing before the Planning Commission. They will weigh in on the zoning ordinance amendment that the planners put together. They may have recommendations for changes, they may not. They may not recommend approval at all. But ultimately, we'll have to make a recommendation to this board. And when it gets to this board, you're not required to hold a public hearing. You could, but you're not required to. And at that point, you make a decision whether or not you want that zoning ordinance amendment to be adopted or not. That, in short time, is an overview of this regulatory ordinance. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Siebert. I'll bring it back up to the board for questions for Mr. Siebert. Trustee Bosworth?
Not at this time.
No questions. She didn't have any questions on it.
I have questions.
Yep.
Treasurer Allen, please.
What is, you said it has some distance. What does it have distance from and how far?
There are 1,000-foot distance requirements, which are contained in the zoning ordinance component, from churches, from schools, from daycare centers, drug rehab facilities, things like that. Some of it parallels the regulations under the state.
What is 1,000 feet? What is that? Like 1,000 feet, like the distance of this room?
It would be 1,000 feet probably from the lot lines, property lot lines.
Any further questions from the board?
1,000 feet, sorry. Yeah, no, I heard it as well.
Trustee Joseph?
Thank you. Mr. Siebert, I appreciate the amount of work that you put into this. I know that you, in conversations, I believe that you went into this with the idea of trying to construct a starting point for discussion that put a premium on keeping us out of court. And as you watch the municipalities around the state and really around the region, when there are sort of a finite number of licenses granted, and then you have more applicants than you have permitted licenses, you get into a selection-based criteria, and those have inevitably seemed to have failed everywhere they are. So it looked like the idea of crafting it in the M1 and then putting the buffers in place, the 1,000-foot setbacks from all of the areas, including potentially other licenses, other establishments, would limit the number just by space alone. Fair enough? When you factor in all of the buffers and you look at the space that's available in the M1 district, you would have a small number of opportunities to really have a license when you applied all of the zoning buffers in its current form.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that. When we met, one of the first questions I had when we talked about the zoning district was, is there sufficient light industrial zoning in the township to make this anything more than just a smoke and mirrors? In other words, is there a legitimate amount of property in the township to accommodate a sufficient number of these establishments? And the answer I received was yes. That, again, I'm hampered because your zoning administrator and your planner were not able to make it tonight through no fault of their own. But they would be able to answer the zoning questions as far as how much acreage you actually have in the township. My understanding was there's more than adequate acreage for this.
But, adequate and sufficient, when we're talking in those terms, we have areas in the township that are, zoned a certain use, but maybe they have wetlands, they're not, you couldn't do anything there.
I've asked that question as well. I'm mindful of those because 20 years ago or 30 years ago in the zoning area, mobile home parks, we litigated those every week. And townships that didn't want mobile home parks would say, we're going to zone this area for mobile home park. Well, when you went to look at it, it was encumbered by wetlands, and it was a joke. It was not a legitimate piece of property. We went through that analysis. Again, I can't give you the acreage. I was assured that there was more than ample, now, more than ample is a matter of degree. If you want one of these on every corner, then you make it, put them in the commercial and put them in the industrial with no limitations, and that's a policy decision. The decision we made was that giving an unlimited number with ample acreage in the light manufacturing was a reasonable compromise.
So I just had a follow-up in terms of, for me, the other concern was what M1 would yield, what it wouldn't yield, what types of licenses. So it sounds like from your presentation, that's more of a zoning question.
It's entirely a zoning question.
So I'll just move on, and I'll ask my second question, which I think may be in the zoning world as well. The draft ordinance designates M1 as sort of, you know, the space that we will confine. Is there a mechanism to adopt what other communities have done, in particular, say Warren, for example, where they targeted blighted areas or areas where redevelopment was in dire need? Could you construct this in a way that has, if you envision the township map and we had sort of like a PUD type overlay over certain districts, independent of M1 or M2 or manufacturing commercial, just a site that we said, like, this is an area, this is an area, and this is an area. Could you construct an ordinance that would, one, could we construct an ordinance like that with an overlay type idea? And two, what does that do for us in terms of potential litigation, or, you know, what's the downside of adopting that if it's possible?
Well, the short answer is, of course. It's like a PUD. A PUD is supposed to be a development which is an overlay zone that you can put in. Some communities allow a PUD in any district, and you've got to come in and make your pitch to the Planning Commission as to why you think the site is unique, and why you've got to meet the zoning ordinance requirements for a PUD. That's not an issue. What becomes an issue is these are, you know, they're all different. The grow operations are more of an agricultural type of an operation. The dispensaries are, name the your favorite pharmacy, and they're selling marijuana instead of selling aspirin. And when you start putting those types of facilities in an overlay zone, first of all, you can't put it in residential. That's out. It's
Sure.
got to be.
Sure.
It's going to have to be your commercial, your industrial, you know, whatever your other zones are. You know, you're going to have to do some fine tuning to make sure that another user who's not a marijuana establishment that would like to use that same ordinance to put it in one of these PUDs gets equal treatment. That's going to be some craftsmanship of your planning director and your planners to put that together. I don't know what it would look like, but you can certainly do it.
In terms of crafting it, it would just, in my mind, I'm thinking it would be, you would list the permitted uses within the PUD, and then potentially designate which licenses were appropriate for which PUD. Does that
Yeah, you could
theoretically have validity?
You could do a PUD in a commercial district. You could say, in a commercial district, we have uses permitted as a matter of right. We have special land uses, and we have uses that are permitted under an overlay zone, and you could list out specifically which of the 6 or 7 types of marijuana establishments might be eligible for that PUD treatment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. I think that what's most important in the ordinances is that is clarity and an equal playing field. I'm not interested in the township in any way choosing winners and losers. I don't think this does that, but I think there's a couple of points of clarification that I have. Maybe you can answer for me. Under definitions in particular, you said in your presentation that it would allow all licenses that the state allows. The state does allow for consumption clubs. I don't see where that is defined in the ordinance, if that is to be permitted as well?
It's not. We listed the definition of marijuana establishments in this ordinance is lifted verbatim from the Michigan Regulation Taxation of Marijuana Act.
Okay,
And
so that would fall under that?
It would include every single marijuana establishment that is listed under the state law. I know the ones that you're referring to. There are special event licenses that you can receive under the state law.
Right.
My recollection of the statute is those have to be decided by the municipality itself. So, for instance, you see on St. Patrick's Day, a facility wants to put an outdoor tent and do something special, maybe that they wouldn't ordinarily do during the year, be permitted. As I read the statute, and I don't know how well it's been tested, but the municipality would be able to allow that, so that, I don't know, a bar or a restaurant that wanted to have a particular event could allow it on a limited period of time, whatever those rules would be. I don't see that as being a major problem here.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that if that use would be permitted, I just didn't see it called out in
Yeah, we
particular.
didn't-
Maybe we would need to,
I did not change a single definition that's in the state statute. If I used it here, it's lifted verbatim from the statute. We may have added additional definitions that I created, but I didn't mess with anything that's in the state law. They got it, they got it right. I kept it.
so that would also then the other definition, the other particular establishment that I didn't see called out, and again, your answer might be the same, and that is for those operators who operate what's known as a vertically integrated model, where they are growing, processing, and retailing all in the same facility.
That is not a term that's in the medical marijuana statute.
So-
That term is nowhere to be found in the marijuana statute. That is a term of the industry.
Right.
That is lingo that's in the industry.
So
I
that-
assure you it's not in the statute.
So that type of establishment, just to be clear, would be considered under marijuana establishment when we're
Yeah,
referring to that?
It clearly would be, but I think the zoning ordinance amendment as drafted is going to prohibit that. But that's something the planning commission take a look at.
Okay, and then my last question is, obviously, these ordinances are very carefully crafted, and I've read many, many ordinances within the state of Michigan, as well as those that operate out of state as well, municipalities out of state. I'm just curious if you could just educate the board in terms of the process that you went through to craft these ordinances, what you looked at, what other communities you might have looked at.
Sure.
And kind of how this came to be from its genesis.
All right, from my standpoint, I drafted this ordinance without the assistance of your planner or your planning director. And I'd be lying to you if I told you I did this from scratch, because I did not. What I did was I looked at every single marijuana establishment ordinance in the state that I could find. Some of the more rural communities were not interesting to me. I looked at the larger communities. I looked at the obvious, the Ferndale. I looked at Ann Arbor. I looked at Lapeer. I looked at Grand Rapids. I looked at the ordinances that I thought were in fairly urbanized areas. They tend to be a bit more sophisticated, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but they had, because they were more urbanized, they dealt with a lot more issues than maybe the more rural areas did not. I also went to the states that have had a long history with cannabis. I went to Colorado. I went to the state of Washington. I looked specifically at the ordinances in the larger cities in Washington and in Colorado. Those were substantially more sophisticated than we needed for a variety of reasons that I don't want to bore you with. But I looked at all of those, and I tried to go through and look at the best parts of each. And this ordinance is really a distillation of all of those. I looked at many in the state of Michigan that, quite frankly, I didn't like it. I didn't think they were enforceable. And, sometimes municipal clients have a tendency to say, well, geez, Township Z's got it. Beautiful. That's awesome for Z. But Z hasn't been sued yet, and Z hasn't had to defend it yet. And until somebody in a black robe in a federal court is going to tell you whether it's enforceable, you don't have any idea at all, other than trying to put together your own experience. And I looked at some of the ordinance, and I didn't think they were enforceable. And that's exactly why I didn't go with a competitive basis or based on merit. I didn't read a one of them that I thought would be upheld on the first go-round, and that's why I made these unlimited. But the ones in the states of Washington and Colorado, or in Denver, Colorado, I thought were excellent. So this wasn't just pulling the first one I saw. Again, the ones that you see in Michigan, the Ann Arbor was one of the forerunners. Ferndale was one of the forerunners. Lapeer has recently got into the business. They each had some things that I liked. They had some things I didn't like. But again, a lot of them haven't been challenged yet. And I tried to put together an ordinance that I could say to you, if you can count to 4, and you got 4 of you up there that want to get in the marijuana business that you're not in now, I'm comfortable going to court with this ordinance with some tweaks to it that are not drastic. But with some of the other provisions, I couldn't say that.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. Trustee Vosper.
Thank you. It's, through you to council, it's my understanding there's 10 types of licenses?
Now, the establishments, you mean?
Well, licenses that are available, that the
Well, when you
state
say
says you
licenses,
can
there's only 2 types of licenses. There's a state license and there's a local municipal license. There are different establishments that you are permitting. You're
have. Okay,
permit-
I'm sorry, yeah, establishment.
Yep.
I shouldn't say, use the word license, but there's major type that I think we're most familiar with are growers, processors, transporters, retailers, and then there's safety compliance.
Yep, there's
That would be like
there's a
inspection?
micro business, yep, those
Yep.
are the main facilities.
Okay, and then one of them, and then there's 5 others, I believe. One was already mentioned, a designated consumption establishment. You can actually, is that one of the things we could choose to do, to allow an area to be used as a consumption district?
You could, because in the definition that I've used in this ordinance, I have defined marijuana establishments of all of the ones that you just listed, as well as any other type of marijuana-related business licensed by the Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency. And
Okay.
there's the statute, and then there are the LARA regulations, which are quite extensive. And to the extent that LARA allows them, you would, by incorporation, be allowing them as well.
All right, then you talked about a temporary marijuana event, say if some organization wanted to have a party for something.
Yes, there is a specific
And then-
provision.
And then there's an event organizer. Would that be something that if someone's going to organize these types of events, they would need to?
No. Again, I haven't memorized the regs, but there are nuances to these, and they're all laid out in the state regulations.
Right, I'm
But
actually.
I don't know them all. I don't know.
I'm reading something from the Michigan Township Association magazine that we get.
Well, then
And so this is
then they did read it, and if they found it in there, I'll assume that they read it right.
All right, and then I have a question about one other thing, and that they use the term excess growers. Do you know what that
No.
might mean? Okay, so regardless, even if the author of this article might have
I've read all
changed-
those articles, and some of them are just a real high flyover.
Sure,
They
and
don't
so
give a-
somebody may have made their own new definition or new terminology, whatever, but is what you've given us here, this draft, would we be able to include and/or eliminate any one or all of these types of things? Can we describe how we would want it to be used in the township, in other words?
Yes, remember, we're starting this from the standpoint of, you've built a barrier around Chesterfield. Nobody's coming in. I went in the absolute opposite direction and said, everybody's coming in, but they're only going in this district with these limitations.
Yeah.
The statute specifically allows you to pick and choose. You could say, we're going to have 20 dispensaries and 5 growers, and go through every category. Harrison Township has a very, very limited number of these, very limited. And they've gone through and they've put a very low number on each of them. Other communities have done the same. So you can easily do that. You could go through every single establishment called out in the regs and in the statute and say yes, no, and the ones where you say yes, you can say no more than 10, no more than 20, make up whatever number you want to make up.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Treasurer Ellis?
Did I understand you correctly when you said that this ordinance could be put into effect by of 4 members of the board without a public hearing?
Yes. This is not a zoning ordinance. Regulatory ordinances do not require public hearings. They require a vote of a municipal body at a public meeting, but they are not required, no different than any other ordinance you adopt, soliciting and vending, name any ordinance that comes before the board on any regular basis. You don't hold public hearings. It's simply an agenda item to adopt for first publication, ordinance X, and this would be exactly that.
So Chesterfield Township has been in an opt-out community since the beginning.
Yes.
And now, by a vote of 4 board members, without going to the residents, without any public notice, we could adopt this ordinance.
No, that's not an accurate portrayal. Every single board meeting is noticed to the public. Your agendas are published. Your agendas are on your website. People are here in this audience, I expect, to speak on different agenda items. But the voters didn't opt out of this marijuana establishment statute. The board did. I don't remember what the vote was, whether it was unanimous or otherwise, but all it ever takes is 4 board members to adopt an ordinance. And back in 2018 or so, you asked us to prepare an ordinance prohibiting all marijuana establishments in Chesterfield, and we did that, along with every other municipal client we represent. And every municipal client, without exception, voted by a majority of that board to ban them, and you've done that. This ultimately would pull back on that and repeal it. If at some point in the future you get to the point where you want to do this, you would repeal that other ordinance and say, we've changed our mind. Time has gone by, we've had 2.5 years to think about it, and we no longer want to ban these facilities. We want to open the door on this basis, and maybe over time we'll tighten it up, maybe over time we'll loosen it up. That just depends. But this is no different than any other ordinance. Members of the public are always welcome to weigh in.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? What I'd ask, Attorney Siebert, if you return up here, and then we'll open the public comments, open the comments for the public if they'd like to speak on it. Again, if you wouldn't mind, if you do speak, if you wouldn't mind stating your name, your address, not required, and then there is a 3-minute time limit. There is a sign-in sheet there if you'd like to sign your name and address. We definitely would be interested in hearing from the residents.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Thomas. My address is 34265 Country Meadow Road. I'll be brief. I wrote down that during Trustee Joseph's comments earlier tonight, he mentioned 3 times about the quality of life with respect to the further development of Selfridge Air Base. I would just say, with respect to the marijuana statute, I would just urge this board to continue its prohibition against any such facilities or businesses within the township. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Reverend Joe Kilcoyne from Faith Christian Center, 46,000 Gratiot, where I've pastored the church there at that location for the past 10 years. I'm also a resident of 12 years for Chesterfield, live on Christie Drive in the Chesterfield Lake subdivision. And I would like to echo what he just said. Obviously, Chesterfield, you know, it's home to me, but even more so as a pastor, I've had the opportunity to counsel so many people dealing with drug addictions, and I really don't think that this is what our community should represent. I don't think we should be trying to model ourselves after Detroit or Mount Clemens or anything else like that. I would urge, you know, this community to continue, if they're going to seek any type of drug, to do it through their doctor. If not, continue to go get your drugs from Detroit and Mount Clemens like you've been doing all along anyway. Regardless, though, aside from all of that, I know that there's some money that is brought in from any type of business like this I don't need to remind the board that there was once a motel, the Chesterfield Motel on the corner of 23 and Gratiot as well, that brought in tax money, but is it the right kind of clientele that you really want to be bringing into this community? You've done a lot of work, and I appreciate that, Mr. Siebert, but from my point of view, and I can say on behalf of my church, their point of view as well, that there would be so many people that would be vehemently against anything remotely like this in our community. You also mentioned that the majority of communities in Michigan have already banned it. If this was brought up before a vote, which I would hope that at the very least that would happen, which I hear that you say that that wouldn't have to happen, it could just be a vote amongst, you know, the trustees here on the board. My hope is that it would be a vote before the entire township, which I am quite positive that it would, again, continue to be banned like the majority of municipalities throughout the state of Michigan as well, and I would work hard to make sure that that happened. But that's my opinion on this. I understand that there's many people who are suffering and they can go and get their medical marijuana, but we were promised when it was put out years ago that signed this petition to be put on the Michigan ballot to vote for marijuana when it's just medicinal purposes only. And people like myself said, no, that's just the gateway of where we're going. Well, here we are. Now it's recreational use. Of course, you know, I could see it continuing on and on and on from here. So I'm one who's just standing in the way saying I would like to stop that from happening. I appreciate your time.
Hi, my name is Rosalie Landis, and my address is 58803 Virginia Circle. And I have 3 children in the L'Anse Creuse North School District from 5th grade up until 9th grade. I'm also the Children's Ministry Director at a Chesterfield church, and I'm also a foster parent. And so I have a unique position being a foster parent where I have seen what cannabis use disorder does to families. It is the new alcoholism. It is very underdiagnosed. It's not looked at. I have seen so many parents who have lost their children who are using it, and they say in these family team meetings, they say in court how, oh, I'm using this to treat my bipolar disorder, I'm using it to treat my psychotic disorder or my, any of those things, and they're doing it against the advice of their doctors. They're self-medicating. And in the few years that I've been a foster parent, if I could stand here and say, you know what? The marijuana, it's doing its job. No, I've seen them spiraling worse and worse and worse. And a big part of their connection, one thing that they're consistently testing positive for is for marijuana. My children, the foster child that I've had for the last 2 years, her parents do not reside in Chesterfield, but they reside in areas where they can very easily get their hands on it. Having children, being involved in my church, having foster kids, obviously the future of our community in the next 5-10 years is very important to these people I pour so much into. Allowing these kind of facilities to be in place, you are only going to be hurting those people who are at the highest risk of forming cannabis use disorder. Those are the ones that you are hurting. The ones who maybe no longer have access to cars, they've lost their right to drive. Making it more easily, readily available to them is not helping. It's not helping them, it's not helping our community, it's not helping our children. And again, if I had seen one foster parent or any of these people through the use of marijuana turn their life around, suddenly their mental health is better. And that's a person, I personally take antidepressant medication. I'm proud to say that I have no problem with that. My body needs it. But to see it's medically used, it is observed by my doctor, and it is something that over the years has needed to be tweaked. People using this on their own, unchecked, it is not helping them. And I think people who say that, if you actually stand back and just observe, what does that look like? Does it look like their life is getting better, that they're more in order, that things are actually better? And I think you'll see the answer is no. So I would be very opposed to seeing these kinds of places pop up in our community.
Time's up, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Adrienne Steiner. I live at 49605 Manistee. I am also a substance abuse counselor, so I'd like to piggyback off the other speakers that I have clients come in and say, what's wrong with marijuana? It's legal, but it really is not legal. And especially for the person who is under 25 years of age, whose brain has not fully developed, it changes the chemistry of their brain. And then, you know, we also have to look at what this does to the family, too. A parent goes off and gets these marijuana yummy, you know, good cookies or something and then bring it home. And then the toddlers and then the babies get into them. So it's not just a 21 years and over problem, it's a family problem. And just like when alcohol was illegal, did everyone stop drinking alcohol? No, it was more of an incentive. We can make it ourselves, you know, and that's what this is gonna be. It's just gonna be more of an incentive that Chesterfield promotes marijuana, and I would not wanna see that in my community. I do appreciate all the work you did, Mr. Siebert, and in preparing for it. I just don't believe in it.
Hello. Wow, I can hear that. I don't know if you guys can answer questions. I might have a couple little ones because even though I was sitting right, I don't know if it's my hearing or what, but it sounds muffled and there's a lot of it I couldn't quite catch. My name is Mark Fortin. I live in Mallard in Chesterfield, 48143. Been here since 1973. I look at this. Now currently, it's my understanding that you have already at one time or, I'm trying to think of what I just heard, right? We have already at one time or another, we have banned marijuana from Chesterfield. Is that true? Thank you. I like it just the way it is. Now I like that 1,000 feet bumper. I like the idea of 1,000 feet outside of our township boundaries. You know, I appreciate the time and effort that was put into this. I'm wondering who is pushing for this, and I'm wondering if they paid for the time and effort put into research half of America to find out what their laws are like and how best we might write ours. I don't know if our current situation has been challenged in court or not. Seems like in today's situation, everything is challenged in court. But I do know one thing for sure. If we get this thing, I'm not an attorney, gratefully, thank you, but I've been around long enough to watch Cousin Vinny, and I know that with this thing or something like it is established with all these little zoning rules and ordinances and 1,000 feet and all this kind of nonsense, that the dope pushers want it bad enough and they're going to go to court to change this or that. And depending upon the corrupt judge we get, it'll get changed. So I am absolutely against this in my community. I don't see why we have to mimic other communities and ask for the same trouble. The fact is that it is dope. It is marijuana, and they're not talking about medical use thereof. They are talking about recreational use. I'm 74 years old. I used to smoke 2 packs a day at one time through the Army and all. Do you know where I got my first cigarette? On the dresser out of Dad's pack. Once we get our country all smoking weed all the time, guess where the kids are going to get it? From Mom and Dad, who are off at the corner 1,000 feet from the house, and getting marijuana. You know, I'll be going to, what's a good restaurant around here? We got some good ones, don't we?
30 seconds more, Mr. Ford.
Huh?
30 seconds more. You're on the clock.
Okay. Pick a good restaurant around here. You bring your family, this and that. You're getting dessert after dinner, but the family next to you is lighting up. I mean, what's the limit? The fact is that they are going to challenge anything you create. Let's keep it out of our township. Our families don't need it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Lorraine Smith. I live at 29127 Timberwoods. I'm a resident of Chesterfield Township. I'm also a parent. I am also the sibling of a person with mental illness, which I had to sign a petition on this week, mainly because of his use of marijuana. And it was a battle that I fought very hard, having to sign him into a facility in order to help him to get better, to not be suicidal, mainly because of his recreational use of marijuana, which he should never have access to begin with. I don't believe it's the right thing for the township. I don't believe it's the right thing for our area. I believe that if it had been made a decision that it's something that we should not do, I don't think it's something that we should go back on. And I also feel, as I mimic something that someone else said, that if it's something that is being considered, it should be taken to a vote. And I think that the people and citizens of Chesterfield should have a right to have an input on this decision, because it doesn't just affect the board, it affects the entire township. Every person who lives here, every person who comes into this community, and I think that that should also be taken into consideration. I don't think that any board decision should be made without the input of the citizens, and that's my position.
Good evening. My name's Keith Haddon. I'm at 52349 Creek Lane. Glutton for punishment for whoever on the board's considering this. And we heard from your attorney all the legality that's going to come out of this. And he said, he used the term, the person in black robes is going to have to decide this stuff. A lot of this stuff hasn't come to pass yet. Is it going to be here in this community? I don't know. This is my second board meeting. In these meetings, I've heard you talk about pushing snow and cutting grass. And that's fine. I think that's what the municipal board is for, is taking care of the community. But if we can't get pushing snow and cutting grass correct, how are you going to get into the legality of marijuana? I've heard it said, right, that this is considered in blighted communities as what? A problem solver to take care of blight? Is this simply a financial means to take care of some money issues? And again, the gentleman said it here. Who's pushing it? The drug pushers. The biggest thing in a community against small businesses starting is the startup cost, the legality, the permitting, the zoning, all the stuff you got to go through. Your attorney listed a whole list of something that a marijuana distributor's got to go through just to get in to start business. Who wants to do that unless you've really got something to push? And again, you worry about police departments, fire departments. Where's it going to be? Where's that next fire going to be at? Where's that next emergency going to be at? You don't know. You put drugs in this community. Where's that next child going to be that gets affected? Where's that next family? I come from a family of 6. 3 are dead due to drugs. You're killing taxpayers. If it's the money you want, you're killing them off early. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public?
Hello, my name is Robin Donnelly, and I've been a Chesterfield resident for 10 years. I'd like to say that I've watched this community grow, and it's been something really spectacular, having the Brandenburg Park and now the Paddle Park, and I see that you guys have instituted the parks and paths. So clearly, Chesterfield as a whole has been truly trying to grow it to be a family community, and I think that's wonderful. But I think that partaking in something related to trying to acquire revenue based on marijuana is going to be very detrimental to our community. Mr. David Joseph mentioned himself that we've got a 200-acre parcel that is continuing development, which means there's going to be a really nice revenue stream coming in. And I really don't think trying to acquire revenue stream outside of a true business is going to be beneficial to our community. In addition, think about the fact that we have no way of regulating when an individual is pulled over and to test whether or not they're under the addiction of a substance. It took years for the organization of MAD to actually come up with guidelines. And so now we want to just flood our community with marijuana without any conceivable way of having to regulate it if someone is pulled over for even for a suspicion of it. So I agree, I think it was Ms. LeRae that I think that it's very disturbing that the board as a whole can just make that decision without bringing it to the public. And I think it's important that you hear us, that we want it to be brought to the public and that the public should have a say. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Haddon, 52349 Creek Lane. Keep this short and sweet. I don't like it. I don't want it. That's it.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cynthia Hurley. My address is 25095 25 Mile Road. And I am astonished that this is even being brought up. I can't even believe this. This is Chesterfield. This is where I grew up. And this is even being discussed. And someone else mentioned grass cutting and other things. That's what our community and our township is supposed to be worried about. Not adding marijuana facilities to what has always been a very wonderful and pure township. Again, the other lady said she'll keep it short and sweet. I will too. Absolutely not. And if you want to see people rise up against board members who decide that this is a good idea for our township, you're going to see some action.
Any further comments from the public?
Good evening, Chris Aiello, 49432 Compass Point. I've been here for a long time, but I want to thank each and every one of you for the last, maybe year and a half that you've sat through committees. You've listened. Some of you have actually gone out and visited a few facilities, and some of you have chosen not to do that. I thought we were a little more progressive than the comments I hear today, but the action that I hear presented to you today was sort of absent for the last 2 years, but of course we all want our community to be safe for our kids, and I think any argument that marijuana is absent in this community is misguided. I think marijuana's been around since probably the 50s and 40s, and it still exists in this community on every street corner, unless you regulate it. And that's what the state does, and all the city has to do is decide if it's a fit and where to put it, and from there the state takes over and they regulate it and they protect the community. But you all have done a good job. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's a good source of revenue for our community. I know our budget doesn't look so tight these days from the meetings that I've sat in and listened to, and so that will add to that. I think just a little bit more attention to the right side over here, maybe to pay attention to what's going on around us. Our children are the same as the people in New Baltimore. Our kids are the same. Our parents are the same. Our board members are the same. So if you look at New Baltimore, who has 3 stores opening up behind the post office, if all of you don't know that, that's like right in our backyard. I'm not sure how that community differentiates from Chesterfield. We're all the same. We're all walk and talk the same. So it's all there. It's all here. But I wanted to just thank everyone for the opportunity for Chesterfield to take into a business that will pay dividends to us in the future that other businesses don't. And just for everyone to keep up the good work and respect everybody's opinion and listen to it. Thank you.
My name is Matthew Claremont. I recently just moved to 29915 Emily Lane from Shelby Township. I loved Shelby Township. I moved here because I just recently had a baby with my wife, and there's no marijuana stores in Shelby Township. I don't know why you guys are wanting to aspire to be like Warren or Mount Clemens or even New Baltimore. If you want dirty money coming in here, you're gonna have families leaving, you're gonna have a community that's not gonna be sustainable. I completely disagree with everything that you guys are trying to do. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Patty Grieger, 28292 Charlene. I've been a member or a resident of Chesterfield for over 25 years. I just have 4 little points that I wrote down. Normalizing drug usage is abnormal. We should not accept it. We should not be teaching it. We should not be, just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's a right choice for anybody. We need to stop sucking people into thinking that drug use is okay. Cannabis is a drug, no matter what you look, whether you're using it medicinally or if you're using it recreational. It shouldn't be thrown in anybody's faces or on every street corner that you turn around on. Recreational drug abuse is self-destructive, as one of the ladies was talking about, that she had foster children and the foster parents. It causes euphoria, yes, that's why most people use it, but it also triggers mood disorders, anxiety, depression, anger, and especially paranoia. When those other disorders are triggered, with that you get all kinds of extreme outrages, abnormal behavior, and poor choices are made during those times. Do we really want that for our community? I don't. We shouldn't be promoting it for the residents or our children, because our children follow in our footsteps. I think it was Mrs. Vosberg that mentioned something about the community party or the events. I think there's some legislature that's going on right now talking about the different lounges or smoking lounges, which that would follow according to what the attorney said. Well, think about that. Someone's gonna go hang out at the lounge, sampling all the different types of cannabises that are out there. Maybe you're gonna meet up with your friends there, whatever. It's really no different than impaired drunk driving. I don't want that on my streets. I don't want my life at risk. I don't want your life at risk. So we really need to stop glorifying this cannabis usage. It also has been proven that it causes community degradation. There's a lot of increase in homelessness and crimes around the nation because of overuse of the cannabis. We have enough with the beggars on our street corners and the shopping malls in Chesterfield. We also have enough with our heroin express busing system, as we call it, because we've in the past know that people have robbed local stores for drug money and they hop on the bus and they go to the city and they use their heroin and then they come back. Do we really need that in our community? We have enough of it that our police department has a hard time managing. I know we'll never be able to stop the complete infiltration of the stores around our community, but we can definitely stop it in Chesterfield. There is so much online shopping right now that makes it available to the people who are using the substances.
I've got to interrupt you, ma'am. Time's up. 3
Okay.
minutes. Appreciate it, though.
Yep, thank you.
My name is Karen Pelka, 57824 Kasmerick. I work with the students in this community, Lance Cruz, Anchor Bay, New Haven, and we build their self-esteem as a nonprofit. It's enough of a battle with young people with what we have to deal with just phones and social media. So when you talk about drafting an ordinance, what's the risk versus the benefit? Is it the quality of life that we were just hearing about? The other thing is with a special permit use, remember May 1st, 2010, when Michigan became a non-smoking state. And so if there's a special ordinance, a special permit that someone can take and have and then smoke, that travels. And so if we're a non-smoking state, I think some of those things should be considered so that also our young people then don't go to the parents and take that and use that as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further comments from the public?
After listening to everybody else here, I think I'm not going to be very well liked after I'm done. My name is Robert Nybo. I live at 34335 Lakewood. Not only am I a resident, I'm a parent,
And I'd like to say that I think there's some kind of misinformation on this. This is not your typical Cheech and Chong, as everybody knows it, in this industry. The industry, and I know this because I'm also a builder. I've built many of these facilities in the last 4 years across the entire state. Muskegon, Battle Creek, Saginaw, just about everywhere. Detroit, Jackson, and the people that are coming in here and building these facilities, they're not really drug pushers. As a matter of fact, Anheuser-Busch is under construction right now with a 100,000 square foot grow facility so they can use the CBDs of this in their wellness drinks. That's happening right now. The makers of Bayer Aspirin has gotten involved in this. Coca-Cola has gotten involved in this for the CBDs. This is also, since I've built several facilities, probably 8 already, this is the most regulated industry that I have ever seen, and I've built in a ton of industries. I've been building for 30 years. This is highly regulated, highly tracked. Nobody under 21 is allowed to work at these places. Nobody with a felony background can work at these places. Everybody is checked in. Your license is scanned in. The state monitors every purchase that goes on. It monitors it from the grow facility. It's tracked to where it goes to the dispensaries or provisioning centers. It's tracked to who buys it. And the marijuana, or the cannabis, as we like to call it, that is not used, that cannot be used for whatever reason, mold, whatever, that also has to be tracked on how it's destroyed, and it's all under camera. Now, there's some communities, to put some of your minds at ease, there's some communities, not all, some, Lenox is one of them, Big Rapids is another one, where the police department also has access, the local police department has access to the camera system. In these buildings, besides the bathrooms, there is not 1 square inch of these buildings that are not under camera 24 hours a day. The state has access to these camera systems, and so can, if you put it in your ordinance, the local police departments. And to answer the question that one of the gentlemen said about where these fires are going to happen, I'll tell you where they're going to happen. They're going to happen in the illegal grows because they're not permitted, they're not inspected. I've seen it before. Our company office is in Sterling Heights. They've had 650 illegal grows already in the last 2 years there. A lot of them were from fires. That's how they found them. Because it's not regulated, the electrical inspectors are not involved, it's not designed right. And like I said, this is a lot of very business-minded professionals coming in here. It's not your Cheech and Chong, it's not your dope pushers. That's all I have.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from the public?
Well, if he's not popular, then I'm not going to be either, that's for sure. My name is Mark Abraham, and I operate one of the first marijuana facilities that have ever been licensed by our state. The people that walk into our provisioning center are cancer patients. We have multiple sclerosis people, but the people that I care about the most are people that I served with in the military, people that have PTSD like you can't believe it. And for anybody in this audience, I'm sorry to say this, but for you to take away the opportunity for a person who went to Vietnam or Afghanistan, the opportunity to say, I choose marijuana at night instead of going to the bar and drunk driving my way home or becoming an opiate addict, which most of my friends were that got out of Vietnam, I think it's wrong. I think that this is an issue of choice, and I think that marijuana has been voted on by the state of Michigan, and right now the choice is in the hands of this board, and I understand in this community. But I believe that there should be a choice. People that don't want to go don't need to go, and I completely, absolutely understand that. But for anybody to consider it to be, some, evil drug, I disagree with that completely. This is what keeps people hanging on. There are people that come back from war, and they've seen the worst in humanity. And they go home, and they choose to go home and medicate with medical marijuana. And if it's recreational, it's recreational. But by the same token, most people are consuming at home. And most of these places are going to opt to be able to make delivery to home. Instead of people coming to a provisioning center, there'll be an opportunity to deliver to people's homes. But the reason why I'm speaking is because I just believe in choice. And I think most people believe in choice. People that choose to go to a marijuana establishment have made that choice. But to take it away and to not make it an opportunity and to say to somebody that cannabis is worse than going to the bar and drinking yourself to sleep or becoming addicted to opiates, I think that those are the comparisons. Those are the ones that I see. And the people that walk in and out of our provisioning center, they're great people. And I just think that it's a matter of choice. I don't disagree with anyone in this audience's opinion. I completely understand that. But this industry is run by professional people. And again, as this gentleman said, not Cheech and Chong. These are people coming in here with very substantial investments, and they're trying to make this community better, not worse. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public? Any further? One more?
Hi, my name's Josh. I'm a lead pastor at Evident Church in Chesterfield, Michigan. So far, I haven't heard any compelling reasons for this benefiting our community. The gentleman just spoke, talked about those who are suffering from PTSD and so forth. They have these available to them under diagnosis from doctors and psychologists. Those who need this under recreational use, I've not heard one argument that makes this a benefit for our community other than the financial aspect of it. I think that's a wrong reason to make these decisions. As a pastor, I also see the devastation within families, with effect on children and parenting, and I don't see any benefit that this brings to our community, and so I'm against this in our community. Thanks.
Any further comments from the public? A couple more times. I'll bring it back to the board. Trustee DeMink.
There's a lot of different faces here that I haven't seen at this meeting. A lot of different people. There's a few people here I know. I can assure you, I am against marijuana in this township. I've lived in this township since I was born in 1958. Those of you who don't know me, I have a 44-year in law enforcement, still in it. I am a no vote. I will always be a no vote. I have been called by people who are in the business. There's one individual sitting in here who called me. A couple other did. Hey, DeMink, what do you think about this? No, I still work for a police department now. I'm against it. I see what it does to people. There's all these different things. But those of you that are here, I can guarantee you, and I've come out publicly before, I am a no vote for cannabis, marijuana, weed, hooch, whatever you want to call it, in this township. And that's where I'll stand, and that's where I'll stand till the day I'm no longer up here.
Further comments from the board? Treasurer Elliott.
Just a few weeks ago, key senators blocked the Safe Banking Acts, which sought to protect banks and financial institutions who choose to service the cannabis-related industry. One of those pro-cannabis lobbyists on that Safe Bank Act there in Washington argued for the act and said, most cannabis businesses rely on a cash-only model. That model leaves them susceptible to theft, fraud, and violent crime. I don't support this. I never will. Everybody pretty much on this board knows that. Last week, this board unanimously authorized the attorney to seek retribution from the federal government from the opioid crisis, and here we are just a week later. This is a land use issue for now and the future. We haven't even thought about the effect of infrastructure on our public safety department, up and down Gratiot, the traffic, the accidents. We haven't thought about the electric. We haven't thought about the water. Those kinds of increases in needs have not been priced into our current rates. I feel that it is irresponsible for this board to make such a action based on 4, but I do realize it is a lot easier for the businessmen that are in this to get a vote of 4 than it is a vote of 30,000. I am certain that if they do want to bring this to the ballot, that it will be unanimously and overwhelming a no from the Chesterfield residents. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you, Treasurer Allen. Any further comments from the board? Comments from the board? Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just a couple of facts. It's a very emotional issue, always has been, and I understand that. For me, alcohol is a very emotional issue. If you want to get me triggered, then we'll talk about alcohol and alcohol abuse and bars and alcohol establishments and everything else like that. Again, that's personal, and I understand some people may be coming from a personal perspective. But here on the board, we have to look at it from a public policy perspective. And a couple of facts that I'd just like to clarify for people. First off, this issue did come before the voters in Chesterfield in 2018. In Macomb County, 53% of people approved recreational marijuana, recreational cannabis. In Chesterfield, it was 58%. In fact, Chesterfield was one of the highest approving communities anywhere in the state of Michigan at 58%. So it was, in fact, a mandate to those of us in public service, and I knew that when that passed in 2018, that it was going to be critical that I take a lead role as a leader in this community to become educated about it. I was never a user of marijuana. I'm not a purveyor of it now. It's just something I chose not to do personally, as we all have that choice. Someone talked about choice earlier. We all have that choice personally. I choose not to walk into bars and order an alcoholic beverage. It's my choice. A lot of people have wine before dinner. That's great. I choose not to do that. Again, it's personal choice. But I knew that our community was going to get faced with this issue. And so I began educating myself. I made sure that Chesterfield Township had a seat at the table when LARA, the licensing and regulatory agency in Lansing, was discussing the rules for local communities. I made sure that Chesterfield Township had a seat at that table so that we could listen and that we could have some input. We did that, and I was the representative who went to that, and so I heard it directly from many other large communities in the state of Michigan. We were the smallest community there, but had representation. Learned about what this would mean for our community because I knew we'd be faced with it someday. Then this board decided to establish a commercial cannabis committee to further examine the issue. We spent 2 years, and myself and Trustee Joseph co-chaired that committee for 2 years. We had monthly meetings for 2 years. We had the state police, we had the federal agencies, we had researchers on both sides of the issue, we invited people from the industry, from every stakeholder group that you can imagine were invited in and presented to us. We then, as the Cannabis Committee, took all of that information and presented it to this board in the form of a presentation. Here's what we found when we went through our process. That is available for anyone to see that presentation and to look at all of the material from that Cannabis Committee. Those meeting minutes are available online. I encourage you to take a look at that, perhaps for those who want to learn more about the issue. All of that material is available for you. And for 2 years, no one from the public showed up for 2 years. And it was disheartening because we wanted, as Trustee Joseph mentioned, we want to hear from our residents. We want to hear from the public. We want to engage and understand where your perspective is on it, and also so that you would have available the same information that we did, because it was very enlightening. And my position developed through over 2.5 years of research and educating myself about not only the social impact, the economic impact, what the responsibility was from a municipal perspective. As a leader, what would this mean to my community in every aspect? And so that's where my position came to on this. I also faced some realities. I spoke with our public safety director at the time, who is now our supervisor, and asked him about what we were facing in this community from a public safety perspective. Here's the reality. This substance is here. The worst part about it is here in the illegitimate market. In fact, the illegitimate market has begun to thrive in Chesterfield over the last 2 years. Since the legitimate market has been operational in other surrounding communities, that illegitimate market floods out of those communities and into communities where you don't have a legitimate market. That's the reality of what happens. We've had more gang activity. We've had more marijuana moving in Chesterfield since legalization in other communities who have adopted legitimate models. So what does that mean for us? What that means is that, and as someone else pointed out, it's being delivered in. We can't stop that. There's nothing we can do to stop it from coming in. So the best that we can do from a responsible public policy perspective is to put in place local regulations, to put in place a legitimate market locally, because the reality is when you do that, what we have found, and our friends in Harrison Township, I don't know, for those of us on the board who may not know, when Attorney Siebert said they have a limited number, they have 26. There are 26 processing facilities in Harrison Township. Most people would have no clue there's 26 marijuana facilities in Harrison Township. And I was recently at a professional conference with the clerks, with fellow clerks. And the clerk from Harrison Township, I had a conversation with him about it because I knew we'd be discussing it. So I said, what impact has this had on your community? He said, we love it. I said, why do you love it? And he said, well, first off, obviously it's a revenue benefit, but he said what we have done is we have seen a considerable decrease in marijuana-related crime, a considerable decrease in the illegitimate home grows, because that's what happens. You've seen a decrease because they've been driven out by the legitimate operators. He said, and our property values have gone up. Not only has our tax base gone up, our commercial tax base, but property values have gone up. He said, so it's been nothing but positive for us. I said, have you seen any negative impact on your local communities, your schools, your families? He said, no. He said, if there is, we don't know about it. We haven't seen any of it. Now, that's anecdotal, but it is a very close neighbor of ours, right, set to our south. But from a public policy perspective, we've got some real challenges with regards to this issue, and just sticking our head in the sand and pretending that we aren't facing the public safety challenges, that we aren't facing some economic challenges, and that we don't have an opportunity to take control of an industry that is currently running amok here, and to pretend that's not happening, I think is irresponsible. So I think we need to take some sort of action in this regard. I have found also that in my research and in the various facilities that I have visited, and I've taken it upon myself to visit dozens of them, hoping to find one that I had a problem with. I'll be honest, I didn't find one that I had a problem with. Because they are so tightly regulated, because they are incredibly professional operations, these are very, very large, almost pharmaceutical environments. I didn't see a reason why it would cause a problem in Chesterfield, especially the very large pharmaceutical grows. From an anecdotal standpoint, from a personal standpoint, I met with someone recently, and I've met with more and more people who the reason why their family members are here today is because of the products that are produced from this industry. I had he's a business owner in our community, property owner in our community, who lives in Macomb Township, but grew up here and had a family business here for over 40 years. And his mother was dying of cancer. And she was dying, and she also had dementia. Well, she's dying of dementia, would not eat, could not eat. Got down to 68 pounds. I didn't know no person could live at 68 pounds. Literally every day she could have died. She was started on a cannabis regimen that encouraged her to eat. He said, guess what, Cindy? He said, my mom gained 5 pounds last week. 5 pounds. I said, geez, that's almost 10% of her body weight. I said, that's outstanding. He said, it saved my mother's life. And he was anti-cannabis 100% before that. He said, and I know that my kids, that our kids, may be getting this from the street level and not from a tested, safe facility. And that bothers me. And when he says kids, they're over 21. We're not talking about this getting into the under 21 market. This is illegal, whether or not we were opposed to it or in favor of it in 2018. It passed. It is legal in Michigan. And I believe that we have some real challenges in our community with regards to it that we can address by taking a controlled, metered, meaningful approach to it. And I believe we need to have the courage to do that, because it would be very easy not to. And I am looking forward to an ordinance and ordinances and evaluating that and voting for an ordinance that makes sense, Because when I look at the pros and cons of it, from a public policy perspective and my responsibility and looking out for the well-being of this community, I know what's happening now, and that needs to be addressed. And I think this is one way in which we can address those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. Any further comments from the board? Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything. I too, like Trustee Dominguez, former police officer. I also spent 21 years as an administrator in a high school, one of our local high schools. I look at this whole thing, you know, which we had tonight, a presentation. That doesn't mean this board is going to ramrod a bunch of marijuana operations on our township. This was just an explanation. Kind of at a loss for words here. This whole thing, legalization of marijuana. Let's look at the basic. It isn't, and I'm not. I was on this committee too for 2 years. We had vendor after vendor, prospective supporters, very intelligent and educated people coming on. We did have a couple state troopers talked about some horror stories about the marijuana, probably the illicit type. But the bottom line, this whole thing is you hear all these honorable things. Grandma started eating after she had some bud and all this other stuff. There's doctors that can prescribe heroin, I understand too. But it's a profit thing. It's profit. It has nothing to do with right or wrong, moralistic thing. It's a cash cow. Some communities latch into it to maybe additional funds or to help business. That's the way I look at it. And I wanted to be more objective and keep my opinion myself, but for the 58% of our residents that do use it, and that is a personal choice. In a very short time, they'll be able to go over to the former Gibraltar Center or one of the 14 or 15 places in Harrison Township and take care of that, or the 3 places in downtown New Baltimore. And maybe this will pass us by, and that'll put it to rest. And I'll stop right there.
Trustee Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. As has been stated a couple of times, when recreational marijuana passed as a statewide ballot initiative, every municipality in the state was forced to take action in some way. And when we opted out of any licenses, it was because failure to opt out could have resulted in us by inaction weighing in, that we were forced to make a stance, and it was perfectly legal, and our attorney advised us at the time to opt out. And that's where we've sat, and then we didn't just opt out, we opted out and formed a cannabis committee. And the committee was formed, our then public safety director, along with Clerk Berry and I, co-chaired that committee. And the exercise, and I think what I heard at the podium tonight, a lot of people came forward and said, who's pushing this? You know, who on the board is pushing marijuana? I understood the exercise that we started with the Cannabis Committee to be one of education, to understand the ramifications of inaction. And one of the things that was advised, and we were told legally, if a ballot initiative comes forward, so you have a recreational marijuana, which is permitted in our state, independent of how you feel, and as Clerk Berry indicated, in Chesterfield, it passed by the highest margin when compared to other communities. If there is a business interest that comes forward with a ballot initiative, as similar as what happened in Clinton Township, there was a tremendous campaign put forward by the cannabis growers and provisioning centers and those in the business, and their Clinton Township was not in the same rate in terms of Chesterfield in comparative analysis of how the recreational bill passed. I guess what I'm trying to say is there seems to be, from a number standpoint, far more marijuana cannabis users in Chesterfield. And the concern for me was if a ballot initiative came forward, independent of what anybody on this board or anybody in this audience feels, if an ordinance were to come forward and pass, the township would surrender considerable rights regarding how and where and what we could do in terms of regulating it and where it could go and what could be where. So I took the exercise very seriously, and I spent, you know, one night every month in this room, and I tried to listen to our fire chief, who talked about some of the concerns associated with grow operations in residential community, in residential zones. I listened to our law enforcement community. We had some state troopers come in. We heard from individuals in the know about infrastructure demands and electricity and water. And legitimately 2.5 years visiting other communities who have passed it to understand what the possible negative effects are. And I really have done what I thought was a noble effort in terms of trying to understand, not just exercising my personal opinion and say, and I respect those who say it because they've consistently said it. No from the beginning. I believe that it's a gateway. I believe that it is leads to the degradation of our community. And based on my life experiences, this is my formed opinion. I respect that, and that's okay. But what's not okay is to not educate yourself and understand the totality of what your decision or lack of decision to come in at, you know, the 2.5 year mark when there's so much discussion and not know that 1,000 feet represents the space from this dais to that door or, you know, down the block. It is frustrating. It's frustrating because we're supposed to be taking this challenge on as a community and listening to one another. And the summary that the attorney gave us was like somehow reported back, so there'll be no public hearing. It can go without like there's some slippery operation going on, and it's just not fair. I would like to address just very briefly the people that spoke. The very first speaker talked about something which I inherently agree with, the quality of life. The comments were very, very short. This decision needs to be done with the emphasis on quality of life for the residents we serve. The next speaker made some parallels to let them go to Detroit or Mount Clemens and that clientele and that level of people. And I thought, especially this comment was most offensive to me because I thought, especially coming from a pastor, we were all children of God. And this idea that we could just keep it there where the undesirables is just very offensive, and maybe I misunderstood it, and I'd look for some clarification if you're willing to offer it. The next speaker is a mother, a foster parent, and I understood where she was coming from. I've spent my entire life working with broken children, whether it be in Children's Protective Services or juvenile delinquency, and I've seen firsthand, not only professionally but publicly, what drug abuse can do. And I understood her concern, and I respect her fear that cannabis use disorder could proliferate in our township if we took this action. We heard next from a substance abuse counselor who spoke along the same lines. Then we had a comment about, I don't even know where to begin with my cousin Vinny and the possibility of corrupt judges, you know, contributing to the degradation of our community. A resident and parent who talked about suicide and having to petition a family member dealing with mental illness in my own circle. I know that horror, and I am truly sorry for the pain that she's had to endure to get her brother some help, and I realize that she attributes a lot of his problems to marijuana, and I wouldn't muck around there at all. I just wish you nothing but the best because you are truly in a very hellish situation. So I appreciate you coming to the podium and talking about it. An individual that talked about board members being a glutton for punishment, as if considering this subjects you to you know, some type of punishment. I reject, but I respect your belief. The idea of the next speaker talking about parks and paths and an indication to her that we are on the right track. I hope to think that we are. The next speaker just succinctly said, I don't like it, and we have that position represented on the board as well. The speaker who came up next talked about an astonishment that it's even being brought up at all, and I hope you understand that if we don't bring it up, there could be consequences for inaction. And so I think that the discussion and the deliberation is a necessary element. Mr. Aiello, who spoke about his experience in the business community and the individuals that are involved in this, I found that to be the case in the facilities that I visited and the individuals that I interacted with. In fact, every single business or I guess cannabis-related business person that I interacted with is also involved in a number of community nonprofits. Several members of this board had the benefit of some of these individuals because they took substantial sums of money and gave it back to the communities that they do business in, and Chesterfield was one of the leading recipients. So this idea that there are these bloodthirsty monsters out there looking in a predatory way to take advantage and push their drugs, that was not the response to these individuals when they were coming forward and passing out checks to everything from the Chesterfield Historical Society to the police department to the fire chief to get thermal imaging scanners. And these individuals care very deeply about the community that they work in. So I experienced that as well, Mr. Aiello. The next individual who spoke about why he moved here indicated that he has just recently started a family and has a new dad, and I'd like to congratulate him and thank him for coming to Chesterfield. And I take his family safety very seriously as well. The next speaker spoke about being a 25-year resident and the concerns that she had about the board normalizing drug use. And I share some of the concerns that she represented, talking about mood disorders and her overall position that this leads to community degradation. But then we took a little bit of a turn and started talking about beggars, and again, I'm not sure where we were going there. Another individual who spoke, who works with students, and she talked about the risk and the benefit, and I think that's a great place that we should be examining it from a risk-benefit assessment. The next resident who spoke about misinformation and concerns about what happens, and the reference to a 100,000 square foot facility, these things are going in all over the state, and I wouldn't necessarily classify Ann Arbor as a community of ill repute. It is, as the speaker eloquently put, the most regulated business in existence. So there are ways, again, it may not be right for our community, but to pretend that we shouldn't even look at it, I think is a mistake. Mr. Abraham is another one of those individuals that got up and talked about his experience with marijuana. And I don't know Mr. Abraham very well, but I do know his reputation, and I know that he is honorable and as concerned about his community as anybody that I've ever come in contact with. And the idea that he comes forward to say cannabis helped people that I know in a great way is a fair position to take, and it is something that I've heard over and over again from individuals who say, you know, you're my elected official too, and I know that you spent 30 plus years in this community working with drug addicted and broken families, but I want you to look at things from my perspective too. I can't say to people like Mr. Abraham, no, I can't do that because I have a position, and I'm not going to educate myself any further past the idea that marijuana is the most horrific thing imaginable, and therefore I'm going to stand against it. may be politically advantageous, but it's not what you signed up to do, in my opinion. So I thank Mr. Abraham for his opinion. The next speaker said that there was no compelling benefit that they were able to ascertain, and I would only ask that individual to hopefully understand my first starting comments, which were that there is an advantage to looking at this when you factor in nothing else than the possibility of a ballot initiative coming forward, and if it passes, what that means in terms of this board and your elected officials' ability to regulate where it goes and where it doesn't. Because there's a very real scenario that says it goes really without much influence from the board, and that would be tragic. So moving forward, I'm going to continue to try to educate myself and hear from as many residents as possible. And there is no nefarious movement to, sneak in cannabis when you're all on vacation or not paying attention. This is a very transparent process, and I will, continue to elaborate on what my role is and what my role isn't. So, again, I always think discussion is great, and I appreciate all those who came forward tonight to speak on this issue. It was quite a great board meeting for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Joseph. Just going to make a few comments for myself. Number one, this is an opt-out community. As was demonstrated by the attorney, the fences is up. The fences are up. We are not changing that. This was scheduled as a presentation and as a discussion for exactly what was done tonight. I appreciate everybody that came, and I think we all do as board members appreciate everybody that came tonight. This isn't a final decision. The final decision rests with you as the residents. But I got to warn you, this is legal. As stated, it has already been accepted at many levels within the government and within law. We're faced with challenging exactly what your concerns are, managing that. This is a business that wants to come into this community. That's why we scheduled 2.5 years of presentations, as was already stated, to where the residents could come in and participate. We didn't get a lot of participation, but I'll tell you that it's online and it's available to you, and I please stress to everybody, pay attention to it, look at it, because these are challenges that aren't going to go away, and it is, we're going to be confronted with it no matter what we do here. This is, as Trustee Anderson stated, this is a personal choice, and these are, I come from law enforcement, if some of you don't know, 33 years right here in the township. There isn't anything that I haven't seen in this community and how this affects not only children, but adults. And I appreciate all the counseling comments and the parenting issues that come along with this. They're real. That being said, I will never, no matter where this goes, never going to base a budget operationally here. We do not have problems mowing lawns. We do not have problems shoveling snow. There is no tie-in in any township operation to this discussion, period. We are a very stable, functional community. I appreciate all of you coming in here tonight and speaking about it. And with that being said, those are my final comments on this, and
Mr. Supervisor, could I add?
yes, Trustee Vosper.
Thank you for allowing me to speak on this. I appreciate all the comments that were made by the public and also here at the table. I just wanted to add one more thing that may have been brought up, but I want to emphasize it. I personally don't want to see retail use of marijuana, retail space for marijuana here in our township. I personally don't think right now the way it is that it will be anything that will benefit our business community. The other part of this is currently not federally legal. And because it is not recognized by the federal government as being a legal activity, we face the looking at businesses that run as almost entirely cash business. And I don't think that either is a safe way to do business, and I think it just could add to the need for additional protection in the community that our public safety department would have to offer. And the one last thing, the quality of life. Man, when you go down I-94, Pat, through Harrison Township, I don't know of any night or daytime that I've gone through there that you can't smell that marijuana driving by in the car with the windows closed. So it does affect people's quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Joseph.
I just want to say I appreciate Trustee Vosberg's comments, because I don't think I've ever been invited over to the Vosberg home to smoke marijuana. This is not something that you are a fan of, but your attention to at least trying to understand where and how this relates to our community is a much different position when you're talking about the difference between provisioning centers and grow operations. That's at least an indication that there's some consideration of what it possibly looks like. And again, there's nothing to vote on. There is no move forward. But in terms of the cash business, I can't stress to you enough, at least from my education and understanding, there is no evidence of any money laundering operations or things that take place in the marijuana industry. It is, as you say, federally not legal, but there isn't a transaction that isn't recorded, whether it be on camera. The products that are sold are barcoded from seed to sale. So there's a lot of information out there that I would ask you to just continue to keep your mind open and look at. And, again, we're not voting on anything, and I don't know that there's anything to vote on next week. But dialogue and education are critical here. And, again, that is the direction I hope we go.
Point of personal privilege. Regarding the cash business, I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything illegal with the cash business. What I'm referring to is the safety of the employees. They can't call in one of these Federal Reserve trucks or other vehicles to get the cash for them or deliver cash to them. They have to send their own employees somewhere to do their banking, and there aren't that many banks that do this. I sat on a committee that learned about the marijuana issues, the cannabis issues, shortly after, about a year later. And I learned many of the things from that, and business owners themselves were there telling us the problems, including banks also. So that's my reference to the cash part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just a couple, literally maybe 60 more seconds here. First, with regards to whether people take cash or how they do their business, I don't think we're in a position, and I don't think it affects the public policy aspect of this. So that is really a non-starter for me. But Trustee Joseph mentioned something, and I just want to be very clear with everyone because the clerk's office would be the one facilitating the ballot initiative if there is one. I need to make it clear that, as Trustee Joseph pointed out, in other communities, the cannabis industry, to further their efforts, and I don't fault them for doing so at all, have initiated ballot initiatives in these communities. If they have a ballot initiative that is placed on our ballot here in Chesterfield and they say 20 dispensaries, for example, which they could, and that passes, this board will have no way to change that. We just have to figure out where they go. And now we have to figure out where 20 of them go. If we have control over an ordinance, and as Attorney Siebert pointed out, while it says unlimited, given the other provisions in the ordinance as it sits, it greatly restricts the number just by virtue of zoning. We have some control. We have far more control if we write our own ordinance than we do rolling the dice, taking the chance that the industry, who is very self-interested, comes in, gets a ballot initiative, put on in Chesterfield, puts a lot of resources behind it, gets it passed, and then we lose a considerable amount of control of what happens in our community. So that was an excellent point, and I'm glad that Trustee Joseph brought it up. I just wanted to punctuate that, in that our office would in fact be required to facilitate that, and we would have no way to keep it off the ballot. if they do everything required to get it on there. And once it passes, this board would have no control over, if they happen to put a number on it, we would have no control over that. We simply would have to figure out where to put them all. And I think that puts us in a weakened position as representing the interest of our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. Any other comments from the board on 9A? Treasurer Elliott.
In regards to the ballot initiative, this same argument was spoken to the Clinton Township residents, that there was going to be a ballot initiative for all the same reasons, and there was. And it failed, so they continued to hold their opt-out position. Yes, the residents of this township voted to decriminalize marijuana for individuals, and that has happened. However, this is a different question. The question before this board in this ordinance seeks to benefit business owners. The question today is that we're discussing is if the people of this township want large-scale and retail cannabis in their backyard.
Thank you, Treasurer Elliott. Any further comment? Trustee Joseph.
Mr. Supervisor, just terribly frustrated, but 66 cars parked end to end, twice the distance of the longest Miguel Cabrera home run, 3.5 football fields, 13 tennis courts, the Eiffel Tower, the average cruise ship, and 1,000 Subway foot-long sandwiches stacked end to end. That's 1,000 feet. We started this conversation without even being able to understand if that was the distance from here to that window. And we have got to get educated and understand exactly what Trustee Berry is talking about, because if a ballot initiative comes in, we are not Clinton Township, and their margin of error was minuscule, and it was a razor's thin edge. That is not going to be the fate of Chesterfield Township. And again, I'm not going to push anything that residents don't want, but we'll find out, and when we do, we'll wish we had an opportunity to go back and consider the things that we're considering now. That's where I say we need to at least have a dialogue and invest in understanding what our challenges really are. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Joseph. Any further comments on 9A? Seeing no further comments, regular agenda item 9B. Clerk Berry.
9B is to approve a request by the treasurer to collect 100% of the Macomb Community College 2022 tax levy in the summer and adopt resolution 2021-38.
Support.
Motion by Trustee DeMink, supported by Trustee Vosberg. Your time is limited.
Time is
Speak
good.
freely.
Well, it's the same as you,
I don't mean at this item.
but no, it is the same request as you had last week with the ISD and the Lens Cruise, or New Haven, actually. So it's no different than that. They're just asking us to collect their summer school tax on our summer tax levy.
Thank you. Comments from the board? No comments from the board. Comments from the public on item 9B.
I just had one question. This is all collected off the taxes, isn't it? Okay. You do this for the 3 school districts. Do you charge the school districts for collecting taxes? You do?
Yes, we presently are negotiating with the school districts that we're going to charge $3 a parcel on each parcel in their district.
That covers your...
Yes, that covers their costs of the treasurer's office, yes.
Okay.
Any further comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board. Any comments from the board? I have a motion by Trustee DeMink, supported by Trustee Vosberg, to approve item 9B. Clerk Berry.
Trustee DeMink. Aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9C.
Item 9C is to approve a request by the treasurer to collect 100% of the L'Anse Creuse School District 2022 tax levy in the summer and adopt Resolution 2021-39.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Support.
Berry, supported by trustee Vosberg. Again, Deputy Clerk, please. Same statement?
Same statement. Yes, it's just 100% of L'Anse Cruises. They levy 100% of their school tax in the summer. So they're requesting us to levy that.
Thank you. Comments from the public, or comments from the board? No comments from the board. Comments from the public? Any comments from the public? Item 9C, a motion by trustee, or Clerk Berry, supported by trustee Vosberg, to approve item 9C. Clerk Berry, call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosberg. Aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 9D.
Item 9D is to approve a request by the treasurer to collect 50% of the Anchor Bay School District 2022 tax levy in the summer and adopt Resolution 2021-40.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by trustee Demink, supported by trustee Anderson. Comments from the public, or board? Clerk, deputy?
Same
Treasurer.
thing, except for Anchor Bay does 50/50. They do 50% in the summer and 50% in the winter tax levy. So that's what they're requesting.
Comments from the public? Any comments from the public? Bring back to the board. Comments from the board? Seeing no comments from the board, I have a motion by trustee Demink, supported by trustee Anderson, to approve 9D. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9E.
Item 9E is approval to adopt Resolution Number 2021-41, dissolution of the Chesterfield Township Economic Development Corporation, EDC. Mr. Supervisor, I'd make a motion to adopt Resolution Number 2021-41.
Support.
Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by trustee Vosberg. Discussion from the board. Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just to make the board aware of the background on the issue, as you know, the township clerk as well as deputy treasurer, the deputy treasurer serve on the Economic Development Corporation, which has been around since the 1970s. The purpose of that commission was back then the municipalities would sell bonds directly, and that was set up for that purpose. But now in modern times, that does not occur. Municipal bonds are sold by other entities. And we have discussed on the Economic Development Corporation for the last several years. We would meet as required annually, but there was nothing to do. It no longer serves a purpose. And so in discussions with the deputy treasurer, myself, and our attorney, as well as the full Economic Development Corporation, it was decided by the corporation unanimously to dissolve it, as it no longer serves a purpose, and we are simply going through the process. The Economic Development Corporation took a vote, and now this resolution is required by the board in order to finalize the process.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. Comments from board? Trustee Vosberg.
Yeah, thank you. I support this. The Macomb County Board of Commissioners had a few years back dissolved the EDC, the county EDC, for similar type reasons. It's not a needed function anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public? Any comments from the public on item 9E? Bring it back to the board. I have a motion by Clerk Berry, supported by trustee Vosberg, to approve the resolution of 9E. Clerk Berry.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 9F.
Item 9F is to approve a recommendation by Public Works to purchase meters and meter components from Ferguson Waterworks at a total cost of $31,172.06 from GL number 591-542-740000.
So moved.
I'll support that. Motion by trustee Demink, supported by Supervisor Kersten, to approve item 9F. Trustee Joseph, yes.
I just, do we have somebody here from Public Works? Give us a little understanding of where these meters are going. And I appreciate the fact that we've moved them from the consent to the regular agenda to get some feedback on that, so.
Yes, we will. Deputy
Yes.
Director Johnson, please.
Yes, good evening. So with our new, under the direction of the supervisor with his directive, we now have a inventory account for all of our items where we have a minimum amount of meters. And once we hit that minimum, we have a read order amount that gets us through 2 to 3 month process. So I may not know exactly where they're going at this point in time, but what we've created is for every item we have a reorder amount. Excuse me. So in this example, like a 1-inch meter, we might have 60 meters we want to have on hand. When it reaches 20 meters as a minimum, we're automatically going to order 40 more to get us back on par so that we can continue our operation. So that's kind of the process we've been working on, and working with Supervisor and Director Duchesne as well to get that process going. So now we have a routine of, as meters get depleted, we can just go ahead and reorder to keep our stock at the level we need to perform our job.
Full disclosure, I spoke to the supervisor. I understood it, and I really just wanted you to come up and say exactly what you said, because it's a new day over there, and you guys are really doing a great job of
Thank you.
accounting for materials, where they're going. They reconcile with work orders, and you can more efficiently track this inventory with where it's going. And I didn't want to miss an opportunity for you to get to the podium tonight and just share that for whoever's listening, because it's a big step in the right direction in Public Works, and so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Further comments from the board? Trustee Demink, nothing? Any further comments from the public? Any comments from the public? Bring it back to the board. I have a motion. Motion to approve item 9F. Trustee Demink, supported by Supervisor Kersten. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten, I'm sorry, Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9G.
Item 9G is to approve a recommendation by the Department of Public Safety to purchase 10 Crew Force Fire Dispatch licenses and 3 Shield Force LE Dispatch with advanced mapping for a total of $12,792 from GL number 205-301-801-000.
I'll make a motion to approve. Motion, sir, support by Trustee Joseph. Yes, sir. Captain Franks, Chief Miller, thank you.
Just real brief, what this is, it basically takes our mobile computers and knocks it down to a cell phone in the fire trucks. The way our systems work, we have 3 separate components. We have a CAD component, which is our computer-aided dispatch, our mobile, which is what is in our cars that receives the information and tell the first responders how to get there. It gives us routing, it shows the location of the vehicles, gives dispatch an estimated time how they're able to get there, and allows them to communicate with our dispatch system through technology. Currently, it costs us a couple $1,000s to put this stuff into our first responder vehicles. These licenses actually allow us to replace the in-car mobiles with a cell phone. So the tracking of it is done through the cell phone, the communication is done through the cell phone, and you can literally just put it in a docking station, plug it into the car, and you have a full mobile in the car. We want 10 of them to replace all the fire truck computers in there, which are due. A lot of them are running on old HP laptops, which is not really the ideal way to run inside a first responder vehicle. And if we replace them with the ruggedized tough books, we're looking about $3,000 a piece plus an additional $1,000 for installation. So we eliminate those costs by purchasing these licenses. On the police side, It gives the ability for our on-call detectives to actually pull up the run on the way from their residence and gives them mapping on how to respond there. And that'll also help with the administration and our evidence text. So that's where the licenses for those go.
Comments from the board? Trustee Vosberg.
Just a question, I support this. Do they need an additional cell phone to do that, or would they use their own device that they're currently using?
So we're gonna be using iPads for the fire inspectors because they actually are able to use their Mobilize and their inspection software and this mobile all on an iPad. And then the trucks, we're just gonna utilize department cell phones for it. We're not gonna use individual cell phones because it does have a tracking component to it, and we don't wanna put personal information with professional information.
Okay, so, but the iPads are also existing iPads, they're
The
township?
fire department for their inspectors have the iPads. They were purchased mainly for the purpose of the Mobilize and their inspection software, but now we found a separate part of it. And then for the cars that don't have the iPads in it, we're gonna use Android tablets because we can pick them up for about $300-400.
Okay, so that will be a little bit additional cost
Yes.
to that, okay, thank
But
you.
right now,
But
we're-
less than the.
Yeah, and we're
new
due to
sy-
replace
new
those
deal.
other systems. Right now, that's actually it fell perfectly in line for us, honestly.
Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
Do you have anything you wanna add, Craig? You good?
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Item 9H.
Item 9H is to approve a recommendation by the Department of Public Safety to purchase 4 vehicles from Signature Ford negotiated through the state bid list in the amount of $218,608 from GL number 205301986.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Support?
Supported by Trustee Demink. Captain Franks.
This is really just on our capital improvement plan as a replacement of vehicles that need to rotate out of our current fleet. They're at the mileage and the length of time that it's time to get rid of them. Good news is that Cap McNair did extensive research on it and found that Carvana is gonna offer us about $24,000 for the old ones, so it's a good time to rotate them out.
Comments from the board? No comments from the board. Comments from the public? Seeing no comments from the public, I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Trustee Demink, to approve 9H. Clerk Barry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Item 9I.
Item 9I is to approve a recommendation by Facilities and Operations Department to make improvements to office and conference room spaces at the DPW building in the amount not to exceed $12,470 from GL number 591-441-931000.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Supported by Clerk Barry. This is this component is part of the restructuring and, that's going on within the DPW, building, both, in use of space and, occupancy within that building, so. Mr. Sonnenberg, if you want to address this topic.
Sure, just briefly to expand on what you had said, this is a part of, as we analyze our space and how it's used, just the building hasn't been renovated in 20 years, it's still in great shape. It's just some cosmetic things as we address some concerns in some areas, and we're doing some efficiency models, moving some people around, and just some paint and trim to update some space.
Comments from the board? No comments from the board. Comments from the public? Any comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. In reference to this agenda item, GL number 591-441-931.000 is a water and sewer appropriation account. So proposed improvements to the DPW building for engineering and facility office and conference room, it's not a water and sewer expense. This is a misappropriation of funds that is supported by the residents' water and sewer fees. Facilities and Operations has previously made non-essential purchases of 3 85-inch TVs from BJ's and mounting brackets from Lowe's, totaling $4879.99. If the paint and the supplies purchased included in the project were over $5,000, board approval requirement, and it's an added cost. Water and sewer fees are to be used to support the cost to provide water and services to the residents and not to be used to support any entity in the township. Reference the Water Rate Advisory Board white pages. Over 5 years have pasted, and the proper cost allocations to the general fund has not been resolved and will be a contributor to increases in the water and sewer rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public?
Joe Kadich, live on Sutton. I just wonder, what is the DPW building? Is it the water building you're doing this in, or is it another building?
Yes, it is the DPW building on North Foster, South Foster,
On what?
on South Foster Road, where the
It's
water
not-
DPW is.
It's not part of the water building up off of,
It is the water department. What do you want to call it?
I'm confused.
You shouldn't be. It's been there for years. What would you like to call it? We'll call it whatever you
Well,
want to call it. The
the-
water and sewer operates out of that building.
The water department is it's got the main
Technically on
building. you
Sierra
walk-
Drive.
It's a big building where they got the,
That's the same one we're talking about,
That's the
on
same-
Sierra Drive.
okay. Now, how are they doing work on that building? They don't share the cost of that building. I mean, it's,
Please, I'll finish your question and we'll address them. or I will.
basically what I'm looking at is if they're using the building and everything, the cost of that building, last time I looked at, when I went through the cost and the mortgage every month, I don't know where it's at now, but everything came out and was paid through the water building, or the water department, which they get their funds from their customers. Now, if the DPW is using that, they should be paying for part of that building. Not sharing, basically the lunching, getting a free lunch, being in there, and we're, as the water department, or the water people, water customers, we're paying for that. That should be separated out. And I don't see how you can operate that with, say, okay, now it's a DPW building, and they've paid nothing for it. I'd like to see somebody explain how that is operationally, not only operationally possible, but financially possible. That they just sit there, use it, and don't pay for the gas, don't pay for the heat, don't pay for the building. I think somebody in the Treasury Department should be looking at how that money should be distributed. His money comes out of, whether it's the general fund or what, they should be paying for their part of the building. You know, you've built up, what is it, $1 million hole in the water department right now. Part of it could be because they're not sharing the cost. If you're restructuring, you ought to look at restructuring as to how that whole thing is restructuring. If they're going to occupy it, they pay their part of the cost too. I think there's a financial thing that has to be looked into here.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? We'll bring it back up to the board. Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, I'll try to simplify the question, I guess. This is the Public Works Department the fund that is cited, is it our enterprise fund, in essence? This is the enterprise fund, which the enterprise fund is comprised of the water and sewer customers' payments. That's what comprises the, so this sort of follows suit with some of the questions we've had about, you know, the commingling of monies, and the DPW is a separate entity from the enterprise fund. So, you know, what about the comments that were posed by the, you know, people that came to the podium? How do the water and sewer customers' bill pay for a general fund expenditure? This is the water department, in essence, building of which a tenant, a general fund tenant, resides. The improvements are, or the enhancements to that workspace are directly attributed to Public Works. So how do you make the how do we make the legal connection to the enterprise fund? I guess is the question. Like, so where is the, I don't know, Trustee Vosberg popped up, maybe she's got something there. Oh yeah, I'm just trying to understand how we justify, you know, water and sewer money for a DPW purchase. This is a long-standing like line of demarcation when we're talking about properly funding the department. So to this end, how do we make this expense justifiable?
So the organization is one organization. You can label them DPW, you can label them facilities and operations, you can label them however you want, and that's how it's been done in the past. They were parsed out. Ultimately, this is one group of employees that work out of one building that perform multiple tasks for both water and sewer facilities, and ultimately, it's just one funded budget that operates that entire structure and organization.
I know
Again, this
Trustee
is
Vosberg.
this is workforce diversity, it's workforce interchanging. It's, yes, it's under the title here, facilities and operations, but it's all coming from one operational budget, one operational umbrella.
Okay, I just have a quick follow-up, but I'll defer to Trustee Vosberg.
Trustee Vosberg.
Sorry, it was a clarification question. I think you just addressed that, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of addressing,
we're good.
I was going to do a quick answer to your question, if you don't mind.
if I could just expand on the question, because
Sure.
With the supervisor's comment, I'm just hearing it out loud. I understand it's one funded operation and we have DPW, but the concern I've had for a long time, and it goes back to the idea of in-house labor and all of the discussions we have about DPW work coming out of the enterprise fund, is a never-ending source of revenue if we can just increase the water rate. So I've been very, very interested in making sure that we have a separated enterprise fund which is only for water and sewer, and not a one-funded building with a lot of people coming in and moving parts. And I understand that Josh's team does a lot of work that is legitimately part of the enterprise fund. But we don't have any breakdown. This is a public works, which is not the same as the enterprise fund. We take great care to separate the work that Josh does that is not water department related, to make sure that we're not utilizing enterprise funds. So enterprise funds are very specific in terms of what they can be used for, and I'm not hearing the clarity on how we assert this is a water bill function. So with that, if there's some clarity, I'd love to hear it.
So the operation of that building is falling under, I'm going to try one umbrella. The building is operated by water and sewer, and many, I say, facilities operations work out of that building, but they cross paths to do water and sewer work, and also the model that we're moving towards is a joint operation. Now, can they do other functions within the township in certain areas? Yes, and again, that's a model that's kind of new, and it's going to take some time to further implement. But ultimately, we will have one workforce that does a diversity of jobs.
Okay, I'm good with that, and I like that idea, but that also lends itself to what has been deeply contested and divisive on this board, which is Public Works employees, say, working on Brandenburg Park, or moving a cannon, or pouring a concrete slab to enhance the Veterans Memorial. All noble jobs, just not water and sewer related.
Correct.
So if you're saying that the intent is to sort of mash those together, I got a real problem, because the accountability, and if the money runs out, then we're in a position to really go back for a water rate increase, and we haven't sufficiently separated water bill money. And then the last thing I'll just say is that this agenda item, I think, as you go through the executive summary, warrants a finance department review, and that is not part of this presentation. And from an audit standpoint, I would really like to see somebody say this is consistent with enterprise fund auditing practices, that it is fair and safe to do that from a finance standpoint.
Totally understand where you're going, and I understand exactly what you're saying, and we are moving towards that detailed inventory of what each task for employee, whether it be water, whether it be facilities, whether it be just general labor. In the future, you will get that detailed report. And it's taking time to build that, and we'll be able to give you all of that enterprise fund information, what the true cost is, what the employees' labor, time, effort, material, all of that is coming. Again, this request or this ask is exactly to put management in place to do exactly that. And I know, I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm trying to be as open and obvious with you as I can.
No, I know that you are. I'm really feeling, and again, I don't want to keep filibustering here tonight, but it feels to me that we're getting further away from being able to separate actual water bill money from Department of Public Works. And so when you say we're going to refurbish the office and we're going to use enterprise money because it eventually is one operation, it seems like that would make it more difficult to dissect what it is that is actual enterprise fund legitimate expenses and what is a special project where we have people working on non-water issues. That's a big problem.
I understand your position, and we're working towards that reporting. We are working towards that ability to give you that information, not just you, but the entire residents. So
thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from the board? Any further comments from the board?
So looking,
Treasurer Elliott, sorry.
so looking at the executive summary, to follow up on Trustee Joseph's question, it looks like there are floor and carpet squares from engineering, facilities and operations, and then the joint conference room. Is that correct? Okay. And so, and the resident had a question, is the treasurer reviews this. The Department of Public Works, Facilities and Operations, as well as the Finance Department are all under the direction of the supervisor. So, and this would require a finance review for the questions that were addressed to the board. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you.
Could you restate that? I was trying to follow you. Could you restate that, the part about the financial review?
The financial review, it wasn't checked in here, is that what you're asking?
Yes,
right.
yes. And
No,
it should have been
wasn't.
in your position?
Well, if you are requiring a financial review, that would be done by the finance director, not by the treasurer. That's what I'm stating. If you're asking for a financial review, and I believe you're asking about which fund should these expenses come out of, is that correct? I don't.
Yeah, so to clarify, what I'm asking for is, like, and you hit on a couple of those, engineering is definitely not a enterprise fund function, although it could be in a specific instance. It would be documented that the engineer was working on a water pipe or a sewer pipe. In this case, we're lumping in a lot of what I would consider to be general fund expenditures in the enterprise fund because they happen to share the same building, and that is difficult for me in terms of an audit standpoint, and I feel, you know, whoever or however the process of auditing the enterprise fund for appropriate expenditures were incorporated in this executive summary, and it's not. And that's, I think, what you were answering.
Yes, correct.
And I thank you for that.
Any further comments from the board? I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve item 9I. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
No.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9J.
Item 9J is to approve a recommendation by Facilities and Operations Department to replace 5 metal doors at DPW Garage in an amount not to exceed $13,300 from GL number 591-441-931000.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Supported by Clerk Berry. Mr. Sonnenberg.
Yes, good evening. These are shop exterior exit doors, egress doors within the shop that we've identified are problematic. They don't open properly. They catch at certain points, so it's just more or less replacement for safety issues. So we're going to replace those jams throughout the shop that we've identified have been a problem.
Comments from the board?
Supervisor, I just cite.
Trustee Joseph, yes.
Sorry, I just cite the same problems I had with the previous agenda item and let that suffice.
So real quick, just to expand on that a little bit, we did a couple years ago, we did a study, and we'll send you that information, where we broke down occupancy for the building by square footage, and we actually almost like leasing a building from an owner. So we pay into a fund, you know, general fund pays sewer and water back for our space. We did an analysis a couple years ago with Finance Director Bauer and put that into the budget. So it's something we can talk about. We'll send you the breakdown so you can kind of see the process that we're looking at square footage wise inside the building.
So it's your position that the 13,000 represents the Public Works, your facilities and operations percentage of the repair cost?
Well, it's those shop doors, we break things down depending on what they come out of, but if it's a building structure, just like if you were a tenant, depending on how that lease is written, if it's a building, the owner of the building would replace those items and the tenant would just pay their fee.
So okay, so what portion of the 13,000 is coming out of this fund that was created for a percentage? What portion?
This area of the shop is all really sewer and water related.
Exactly, this is an enterprise fund function.
Correct.
So the relevance of a interdepartmental fund and proportional is really not applicable here because it hasn't even been reviewed by the finance director from compliance with enterprise fund monies to begin with, much less a proportion. So I appreciate the distinction, but it didn't really help in this particular case for me.
Further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. In reference to J here, GL number 591-441-931-000 is a water and sewer appropriation account. Facilities and operations and DPW operations utilize the garage. The repair cost should be allocated proportionately, just like the administrative transfer fees, to all departments that utilize the garage. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
This is a repeat of my other question. Basically, if you got the DPW in that house along with the water and sewer, how much of the actual cost of that building is allocated to the DPW. You're looking at getting it all into one. Basically, it looks like you're taking a run at getting the DPW out of some kind of a general fund appropriation and changing it and putting it all toward the DPW, or the water and sewer. We pay for the water and sewer. We shouldn't be paying for the DPW. That's a general fund obligation. Looks like you're trying to marry them, and you haven't done it so far. And if you look back over the years, like I say, look at the cost of that building and what it costs annually and what share they should be paying. They don't pay anything. What of the equipment that they use that belongs to the water and sewer should they be paying part of? They don't. This is basically taking an obligation away from the general fund that subsidizes the DPW and saddling it on the people that pay for the water and the sewer. It's not right. So I said you should have a financial outlook at that whole thing and see what share they should be paying. This is not a right way to go. It's costing us money basically in a water and sewer that's already $1 million in the hole because of what's happened in the past and what's not being done to protect it and get it out of that debt. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board. Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you. I to understand, I thought that the director of F&O said that they in effect pay rent for their share of the space. Did I understand that correctly?
That's what he said, yes.
Okay, so they are paying into, the money they give goes into the enterprise fund or the journal entry, whatever it is that happens, goes into the enterprise fund. Is that, am I understanding it correct?
It's similar to the admin fees discussion. Everything is transferred based on usage, proportions, who used it, and that's done behind the scenes.
Correct, so that's.
Within accounting.
And that was based on some measurements. There were metrics to come up with that percentage. So there is a percentage of general fund going into the enterprise fund to take care of building things, like it was said before, when the landlord pays for the structure, but they collect it, in, so to speak, in their rent that they're charging. All right, thank you.
Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, question. So just a clarification that Trustee Vosberg brought something up. So the enterprise fund is being charged rent or usage of that building, and it's being taken out of that fund. But is that besides the administrative fees that are taken out of?
I don't want to confuse.
I heard that term. I heard that term.
Bad example on my part, but
Well,
no,
I heard that. All
administrative
right.
fees are not.
Okay, I guess we don't want to go there.
That
Thank
was
you.
an example.
All right.
Along those same lines, I'm sorry, permission to speak. Along those same lines, would there be an ability to track a line item that shows a contribution to the enterprise fund from the reciprocal sort of, rent, if you will, that's being paid? Do we have a line item that shows a contribution to the enterprise fund from the general fund to pay for these things?
I don't have, Deputy Duchesne, you want to speak to this?
Yes, a couple of things. The department had been working on work orders they generate that are internal process that the Department of Water and Sewer, for example, does a work order, and that work order then results in whatever the charge is and allocated to the different appropriate funds. This is really too simple, it's too complex to put into simple words, but the idea being the overall operation is charged to the appropriate fund as the work takes place. So that way the work orders and the accounts, the finance can demonstrate what the charges are to the various funds. The idea that this is a difficult process to understand, I get that, but it is auditable, and it will be found to be a solid practice when Plant Moran examines the audit at the end of the year. These are something that both Mr. Johnson and Mr. Sonnenberg are aware of. They're aware of what they charge to the water and sewer fund. They are aware of what's charged to what we basically have as Public Works Fund, which is a really relatively small area. But water and sewer can bill the general fund internally in an invoice basis for services rendered specifically, and it does that. So the internal ledger number that you see, we don't adopt budgets by the general ledger number. We adopt it by fund. The general ledger is used only in internal allocation by finance to track and monitor expenses. Finance is aware of this practice. The finance and accounting department knows of this agenda item and how it does. The township did not always work this way. The township is beginning to work more professionally all the time as these allocations are made. So when you have a facility owned by Chesterfield Township, the allocation of cost to the various areas is done on a demonstrated basis of use. In this area, for example, they have installed things that would be jointly used in conference, they would jointly be used in offices, but there still can be a clear separation when a purchase is made such as this, and that's certainly what they're doing. When you build monitors in, that's for the Blue Beam system, for the vehicle location system, for conference and teleconferencing that is shared by, when we say departments, we have to remember that engineering has 2 water and sewer inspectors working for engineering, but they actually work on water and sewer projects. When you have situations where now facilities, instead of hiring more people as reduced 2 bodies, needs employees, they can virtually rent them from the other funded people to use to the betterment of the entire township and more efficiently. So it is got some movement to it, and it doesn't always show up in this kind of idea, but certainly finance, and I would recommend that the supervisor action that he's contemplating taking in January and February to have a cost-benefit study by real professionals projecting the actual use of the water and sewer fund, the use of the general fund, and all of those be done on a 3 to 5 year basis so that you can have that input and you can actually see how things are allocated, and an outside person such as a professional audit team or engineering team that applies American Water Works Association standards and APWA standards to it can give you that verification that I think each trustee up here wants the assurance from, and ask some very good questions about the process. But it is not simply in this type of agenda item that you can lay out all of those intricacies and involvement in that. But you have some great questions. I think if the supervisor brings forth the proposals in the next year to do individualized agenda or fund audit and projections on cost-benefit studies by real professional people, and you have that input in that, I think you'll resolve a lot of your questions. In fact, I'm sure of it. And this is certainly auditable and will pass audit by outside parties.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions from the board?
Mr. Supervisor.
Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you. Clear as mud. Thanks, Mr. Duchesne. Well, and that's it. Sometimes we need, we talk about things in a conceptual manner, and it's easier to ask what that would look like, you know, like 1,000 feet. And what I would say here is when the finance review is not on the agenda, and I'm sure that we've talked with the finance director about these types of issues in quite a bit, a lot. However, it wasn't checked on the agenda. If the finance director looked it over, and she isn't here tonight. So I think that makes it just what we think, all right, and without being able to see that. So I do know that Mr. Duchesne has been working diligently to help fix some of the issues with the agenda so that it is a little bit clearer when the finance director looks it over. I think on some of these items, I am a supporter of true costs going to where they're supposed to be. And I do think there's some validity in the question and the trustees' questions. I believe they're just simply doing their due diligence, and I think this is an important part going forward that we'd like to see in the new year. Thank you.
Any more comments from the board? I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve 9J. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosper.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
No.
Item 10, addendums. There are no addendums. Item 11, public comments. There is a 5-minute time limit. The clock will start when you begin to speak.
John Spica, 53978 Connor Drive. In reference to Supervisor Kersten's comment at the end of the 12/4/21 board meeting, Chesterfield Township Board meeting, Mr. Supervisor, the theatrics at the end of the last board meeting would win you an Academy Award in acting. First thing, Supervisor Kersten, is to admit that we have a budget problem in Chesterfield. This is a starting point for honest dialogue. You have to admit we have a problem to solve the problem. We have a deficit of $3.4 million in the 22 Chesterfield budget. This is a real number from the data contained in your budget with your signature on it. And until you're honest and transparent with the residents, you can't move forward to fix the problem. Supervisor Kersten, using words like balanced, misleading statements, this township has a lot of money, is an outright lie. The data and the facts show we're in real trouble, and yes, we are hemorrhaging in the township. Using the word balanced is really lying to the residents. A balanced budget means your revenues exceed your expenditures. Chesterfield doesn't have a balanced budget. The only area that's balanced is leisure services. God bless our seniors. Hearing you reference the word balance was like watching fake news. I say the sky is blue based on facts and data, and you say it's green based on misinformation and lies. Supervisor Kersten, another lie that you mentioned was that Chesterfield is the fastest growing municipality in the area. That's fake news. That's not true. Chesterfield Township grew by less than 2,000 residents in the past 10 years at 45,376, according to the 2020 U.S. Census data, a 4% growth compared to Macomb Township at 15.2% and Lenox at 15.7%. Macomb Township and Lenox Township were 3 times the growth of Chesterfield. Supervisor Kersten, noting you said in your statements at the end, had no supporting data. It reminded me of a bad flashback from the former supervisor with his extreme confidence and no supporting data. The raises I talked about in the last board meeting were out of line with the union contract, as were others that I didn't mention. How do you give a raise of 10% to Jody, 5% to Mike, 6.5% to Josh's assistant, and 4.5% to Amanda, and 2% to the rest of the employees and keep the morale in Chesterfield up? It's impossible. Supervisor Kersten, I asked about the 3 Samsung 85-inch smart TVs that facilities and operations purchased on the last bill run. Supervisor Kersten, you never answered my question on where the TVs went and why they were purchased. Who authorized the purchase? Was it Josh? 85-inch TV an 85-inch TV is used for gaming. Why would we need those TVs in the township unless were we going to give them as Christmas presents on the taxpayer's dime? Supervisor Kersten, I called you twice in the last week with no follow-up call from you. I can tell you this, the former supervisor returned my calls even when he agreed or disagreed with me. That was one of his strong points, follow-up. Every time I've called your assistant, Karen, I never get an answer. I always have to leave a voice message. In the upcoming year, I'd like to see our 3 full-time elected officials here at the township on a full-time basis. This means 8 to 4:30 every day, serving the residents. This is going to be tough for Clerk Barry. I think we can take baby steps like an hour a day for the first month and move on from there. This is about getting Clerk Barry acclimated with coming to work every day and being in the building on a daily basis. Clerk Barry, you were not present at the board meeting on May 11th of 21. You were not present for the sidewalk meeting on May 17th of 21. You were not present November 23rd of 21's board meeting. Clerk Barry, the last board meeting had to be exhausting for you. You were in the building for almost 5 straight hours. Wow. It's unacceptable not to show up for work and collect a paycheck. That, to me, has always been stealing from the residents. I talked about charging TV brackets to the water and sewer department.
Time's up, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from the board?
Basically, I'd like to make some comments about the meeting over the budget, what was last week or whenever it was. I had some questions. Basically, I didn't like the way the meeting went over the budget to begin with. It was just like now. People come up, have questions, expecting answers, and everything waited till all the questions were asked, everybody made their point, and then it came back to the board. Unfortunately, I had to leave before then, and so I watched the rest of the meeting and your comments, or whatever you want to call them, back after a couple days on the video. Basically, to respond to some of those, when I had comments about the repayment of the $3 million loan that the police department took out in, 2017, and why wasn't that repaid? And I hate to say it, your response to that, Trustee Joseph, was almost comical. I mean, it's like, well, we don't have a police department now, so who do they repay it to, or who repays it? That police department is no longer there, even though they show up in a budget as a police department. They're part of whatever you want to call them now. Which, you know, if you look at somebody else taking a loan, all they have to do is, I don't want to pay that loan, go out and change the name and exonerate themselves or exempt themselves from repaying that loan. That's not acceptable. The other part was, I asked how, even owing that money and running the public safety department now $1 million under budget, do we end up increasing the police force by 12 men? It was 30% increase, probably over the last year. And what justified that? And that came out like we have some kind of a special program attached to the 9/11 call center. That makes a lot of sense, I guess. You look, for example, at New Baltimore. New Baltimore wanted 1 fireman to add to their team, and they put it on a public vote, which essentially you guys would have had to do if you had to basically enforce or adopted that Public Act 51. That lets you get away with that. And it still bothers me that you're still operating it, because you can do whatever you want. You can even expand it to the point that you can tack on 2 more mills onto the existing 8 mills, and the public has no say about it. That was one of the first things that bothered me. Second thing was on the water department. I asked, why are we doing projects? You're looking at, I think it was Piggy Lane, it's $2 million. You got $1 million or so at the pumping station. When you show a $1 million deficit in the water department, why not just delay those so that you don't have to do anything this year to make sure that you got the water department running the way it should be, and they're running according to the costs that they can live with. And that's within the money being collected from the customers. It's like any other business would be, you're gonna reduce your cost. But apparently you're not willing to do that. But at the end, when it came through, we said, well, this township has got good bond ratings. So we're gonna, instead of trying to fix the problem, you're gonna get bonds so we pay for it for the next 30 years? It's not the way you run a business. And then eventually you said that it really wasn't your budget that was inherited from Dan Activetti. Well, you had 5 months since you've been here to do something about it. It could have been changed, it could have been your budget, but obviously it was still Dan's, and I don't know why you still pursued it, and I don't know why, basically, I don't think you understood it. And your reaction at the end when you berated everybody, said somebody called you a liar, I didn't see any of that in any of the presentations or any of the questions asked. That was a poor performance. All it did was reinforce the fact that you didn't understand the budget and had no way to defend it. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
My name is Fred Neenstead. I'm not a resident of Clinton Township. Most of you I don't know. You probably don't know me. I have some experience personal with this issue on marijuana, but my personal experience doesn't really mean much to all of you, I'm sure. In point of fact, I would like to offer my condolences to all of you to have to wrestle with this large problem for your community. Again, I'm from Clinton Township. We have the same problem. The grow operations have got to be a source of real detriment for all of you. Your citizens don't want it. Clinton Township citizens don't want it. But the law was changed, and it offered people who believe in the Constitution the freedom to choose the chance to grow marijuana for medicinal purposes. That fell apart pretty quick. It was about money. Now they want to expand it. You're being asked to draft legislation to expand it. Do you really fear that there's going to be a ballot measure? Take a look down in Warren. I've been to many Warren council meetings. They are struggling. The community is in a huge divide over what the detriment is. You mentioned a 1,000-foot barrier. What that tells me is that if there's a medical or if there is a dispensary in a building, that within 1,000 feet, many other businesses don't want the property. Take a good look at the south part of Warren. The property values are plummeting at a time when inflation is going to be raging. Why? Is it crime? Is it drugs? Is it the loss of the family? You all have to measure that personally. You got to measure that when you make your choices. Don't do it out of fear. Do it in a sense of boldness. Stand up for the people who are defenseless and make the choice that benefits your community as best you can. That's what our Constitution demands of you, the freedom to choose. I'm dismayed by the way our citizens view this simple thought. I want to offer you in goodwill a very peaceful and joyous Christmas season and a very happy New Year as you struggle with the problems in your community. God bless you all. Thank you much.
Thank you, sir. Further comments, public comments?
Mike Orton, 50393 Bauer. Before I talk about the issuance for the new year, I do want to just address something for the last meeting. Mr. Supervisor, you had said that people were coming up and giving out campaign speeches essentially at that meeting, or the preparation for future running of offices. And I just want to make something very importantly clear in this community. Me personally, I have no intentions to ever run for office in this township, and I will explain why. This township's politics and the way it is conducted is toxic. It is uninviting, and frankly, from the 4 years now that I've been regularly attending these meetings after my second deployment, I gotta say I feel like I have actually been discriminated against because of my age in this township. I don't know if you know this, but I am 30 and I still get treated like a child up here simply because of certain things I would like to ask or recommend or just educate the public on. And I feel that when you actually look at this community, time and time after again, am I the youngest person that has ever even been in this room? Are you willing to attract younger people in this community? And if that's the case, why are they not more civically engaged in a time period when politics is basically the entirety of everyone's lives nowadays? Everything is hyper-partisan, everything is hyper-politicized, and yet there is almost no interaction with such a situation. And, you know, with a comment from last week, I don't know if you misunderstood it, Mr. Joseph, but I feel like I was personally attacked in what you had stated. And, you know, I'm sorry that my time period up here comes at a cost of your guaranteed 45 minutes of each meeting. But I do feel like every time I come up here, I try to make the most of what I want to say and try to be positive, try to be optimistic, but also be a realist. And that is the problem here, is that people aren't looking through things with a realistic lens. With that being said, yes, I will never be a candidate in this township's governmental policies because I just don't want to deal with that headache. And personally, I am amazed how any of you are willing to put up with that, whether on the board or in the audience, because I know the same actions come from the people in the audience too. It is unnecessarily toxic. It's not about niceties, it's just about civility. You can be nice and have a knife through someone's back. Being civil means just having general respect for each other and for everyone else. With that, I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We have a new year coming up, 2022. Make some goals, try and stick to them, try and do better. You know, as we keep on trying to claw our way out of our situation with the pandemic and now these economic situations, hopefully next year will be a lot better and we can all prosper together. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? I'll bring it back up to the board. Trustee Anderson. I'm sorry.
Robert Nibel, 34335 Lakewood. 3 minutes earlier just wasn't enough. I know my comments earlier, I probably got the bad stigma along with the cannabis industry in itself. Just to let you know, when the statewide ballot initiative came out for legalizing recreational marijuana, I voted against it. I didn't like it. As a builder, a general contractor, before the cannabis industry started, right after 9/11, I was building churches, a lot of churches, all the way from Rochester down to Toledo, Ohio. Everybody went back to church after 9/11. When the economy kind of took a crap, people stopped going to church or they stopped giving. The coffers started getting empty at churches. Cannabis opened up. I struggled with it for a while. Met with several prospective clients, and it was only through the research I did that I learned what this industry was all about. And some of our clients, and I don't speak for everybody in the industry, but some of our clients, these people are microbiologists, chemical engineers. These people are highly educated, highly professional. I don't personally care one way or the other if you allow cannabis in here, but I just want you to be educated in your decisions, if you make the decision or if it goes to the residents. It's not entirely a cash business. It is tracked. You can use credit cards. You can't use a check, but you can use credit cards, debit cards. So it's not entirely cash. And to your comment about the odor in Harrison Township, I agree with you. But there are regulations you can put into your ordinances that stipulates that it's got to be odor-free. I've built them. I've done it. You can drive down to the 35,000 square foot facility in Jackson we built. You can drive up and you don't smell it until you walk in the door. So there are things you can do with carbon filters, things of that nature. You also don't have to approve recreational. We just finished a facility in Lowell that is a dispensary that is strictly medical. That's all they can sell is medical. So there are different options you can do as a community. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. First off, I did appreciate a majority of the comments made regarding the marijuana discussion, both sides. I must say, though, I do find it somewhat tenuous when remarks are presented as dogmatic, with little or no support, and which I know myself might be less than truthful. And I'm not referring to the reports that were made by the public here. Getting on a little more positive thing. 4 more wake-ups till Christmas. And, recently I was freeing up some room in my email account, which I probably should do on a more regular basis. And some of the messages were from 2008. What drew my attention were the names of the senders, names of acquaintances, friends, and family members who are no longer here. I think this is a time of the year that we should not only appreciate those near and dear to us, but kindly remember those that are not. And to those of you that are celebrating the traditional meaning of this season of year, wish you all a Merry Christmas. To those who observe differing festivities, happy holidays. God willing, we'll see you all in 2022. Thank you.
Trustee Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'd like to pick up just where a couple of the, I try to address the podium speakers or at least their comments. I really appreciated Mr. Nibel's presentation, and his, it was interesting to hear the work that he does. I'm guessing probably didn't care which denomination of church he was building because he wasn't a stakeholder in that endeavor. In the same way that he talks about cannabis, I did appreciate his observation about where this country went as it relates to 9/11, and he didn't strike me as a guy that's, here because he loves cannabis and he wants to, he's indifferent about it, and he did talk about some of the issues that he's educated himself on from his original position, and I think a lot of it came by way of his trade. He was exposed to it, but he spoke on a number of issues that I'd encourage the board, to engage in as well, because there's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation, and leads me to the next comment. And I'm sorry I didn't get your name, sir, but I found that to be one of the most uplifting presentations at the podium that we heard tonight. And I with heartfelt gratitude, say thank you for the recognition of how difficult this decision is for this board, because it is wrapped in a lot of politics, a lot of money. It gets very difficult to separate what's what. But I can tell you that one of the board members referenced the ballot initiative in Clinton Township. I received a call from a very good friend of mine, who I would say his family for certain was the architect for the opposition of that campaign. And I've worked for and with this individual with some of the most heartbreaking cases that this county has ever seen. And he starts every day of his life at Mass. And when he called me, he was not happy with me. Someone had got to him and said, I understand you're pushing marijuana, and the words that he used with me are not words that he could use at Mass every morning. He was very, very spirited with me, and wanted to know if I had damaged my head in some way. That's how the conversation started. And I can tell you that this individual, when we worked together in our drug court, I was responsible for running our drug treatment groups at the juvenile court. We ran them on Saturdays. I was entrusted with opening the building and bringing the participants in. All of the kids in the program were substance abusers. And I had no backup, and I had a lot of families that were coming in that day, and our counselors and so forth. And I got a call from Harper Woods PD, and they reported to me that my brother had overdosed. He had overdosed. He was a heroin addict, and he had been in recovery, and he got out, and he started using again, and he overdosed. And he happened to have his two children, like 5 and 3, on visitation. And he waited until they went to sleep, and he used, and it was the last time he used. And as my nephews woke up in the morning, they couldn't wake their father up. Imagine that scene. And I was being called down to identify my brother. It's that guy that I called to say, like, where do I go? What do I do today? He's the same guy that called me and said, what are you doing over there in Chesterfield? And all I could tell him was my job. I know who I am. I know what I get from being the representative, the trustee. I take it very seriously, and I believe in my heart that I have an obligation to understand this issue as best I can. And it's tough. And when another speaker who talks about a toxicity, I appreciated that he prefaced most of his comments with I feel, and I believe in that individual, and I understand his feelings, but that doesn't make it a reality. And the toxicity that we're talking about is unfortunately part of the package, and it looks a little bit ugly sometimes, but our country was founded on a very robust exchange of ideas. You don't have to go, Lincoln Douglas debates, the debates between our founding fathers. They look very, very ugly. Some might even call them toxic. But what you had were impassioned people who believed very confidently in their fellow man, and they felt it was worth an ugly tussle to get to the proper outcome. That was the investment that they made, and that's the obligation that we have. I wouldn't sell out the people that put me here for somebody that dangles $1. I don't know if anybody's aware of what the trustee position pays, but nobody is on this trustee position because they are trying to, leverage a new, boat or condo in Palm Springs. This is a labor of love, and unfortunately, sometimes it gets a little bit ugly. I'm not thin-skinned, but it's not lost on me. Somebody talks about civility and then takes a crack at your 40 minutes. I talk too much, I know that, but you gotta give it as good as you take it. And when you come up and you come to the podium as a paid-on-call staff member with the fire department, you don't get the opportunity as a public citizen to start talking about the operations of the fire department. And that's what I felt that was happening, and that was the issue that I had. So I'm sorry if I offended you. I've known you to be a very conscientious citizen. You come to board meetings. I liked it better a few years ago when you asked about the board members' New Year's resolution intentions, and I remember telling you that I was hopeful to lose 50 pounds in the upcoming year, and I'm sad to report I'm still 55 pounds short of my goal, but I'm trying. Mr. Kadich came forward and he talked about his dissatisfaction with my answer on the police department not existing anymore, but a $3.5 million loan to a police department that is no longer in existence is our reality. And so when you have a special assessment district or a millage structure and you take monies from people, you identify exactly what those are used for. So when I say that the police department doesn't exist, I'm not saying that we don't have police officers. I'm saying the structure of which we fund that is no longer there. So if you were to repay a loan from the police department, the only mechanism to do it would be to take it out of the fire operation because it's one entity. It is a 7.95 mil special assessment district for public safety. You can't separate it because the voters did weigh in on it, and they weigh in on it every year at a public hearing. We can't just arbitrarily tack on 2 mils whenever we feel like it because we feel like it. We have to have a public hearing to justify the expense, and we do that every year, and we send out notices every year. And if you're here, and I know that you are, residents come in and they say, oh, great, another tax. I just defeated the SEMCO, I mean a smart bus and the library and the DIA, and now you're hitting me again, get out of my pocket. It's just a postcard that says we're doing what we always do every year. But I do agree with you in the sense that we have an obligation to make sure that the public safety SAD is protected and only used for the intention of which we told the residents that we would use it for, which is directly applicable to the enterprise fund. And for the time that we spent on the Water and Sewer Rate Advisory Committee, one thing that was painfully obvious to all of us was that there was so much commingling, and that we were not able to discern what was general fund expense and what was enterprise fund expense. And the problem there is that that is a never-ending supply of revenue if we just say we need to increase the water and sewer rates. And that's a problem. And so before we do that, we have to have the demarcation in the two or many, engineering, public works, water department. You can't just take it all out of the same fund. And I agree with you on that. And then lastly, the comments. I won't spend too much time here because I don't really want to mire down in this area, but the presentation at the podium tonight started with awarding the Supervisor an Academy Award. That's hostile. That is toxic. It's not necessary. The starting point then went to honest, transparency, and liars. He used the word misleading. And it was misleading to assert that a particular employee had crafted a 1% administrative fee to yield $14 million. You were off. And you predicated the entire argument on this $14 million. And then it's okay to identify public employees. I'm one, and I've seen in online social media forums where my salary is listed along with my coworker's salary because that is the salaries that are paid by the taxpayers of Macomb County, of which I work. But what was done was a little bit different than that, and it was to assert that there are certain members and certain employees who were receiving benefits because of special favors, when the reality is that they are under, in most instances, some type of contractual arrangement. And so when you sit down and you negotiate a contract, you adhere to the parameters of the contract or else you get sued, and it's a breach of contract. So I think the erosion of decency happened when you used employees' names and then you asserted special privilege and a cabal of the informed and liked, and that was not cool. It wasn't cool at all. And for the supervisor to legitimately, and I heard another speaker who felt that that was a poor performance, is what he said. It was sincere. It was a punch in the gut, and I felt partially responsible for that because I had taken him to task earlier on some issues that I felt very strongly about. But at the end of the day, you look at the guy and you say, who leaves a secure gig in a job that you know inside and out because you've been doing it for 3 decades to take a leadership position in the township but for somebody who's committed to the township? And it seems like when the attacks start, all of that is thrown out the window. I understood it more during one of the ugliest campaigns I've ever seen, and there was plenty of mud going in every single direction. And I understood why people would come to the podium with fire and brimstone, and it was bare knuckle. It was ugly. I thought we were in a different place, and I had hoped that we are in a different place. I don't believe anybody is up here campaigning. I disagree with a lot of people a lot of the time, but I don't think anybody's campaigning. And I'm not gonna start off an assessment of somebody's position by declaring them an Academy Award winner. And, I mean, you're free to do it, but I don't know how I get that individual to take my meetings when I want to talk to you about something that I think is important. I wouldn't take the meeting, and it has no connection to, you know, not listening to this. When somebody attacks you on a personal level, we're done talking on a personal level. Those invitations are just not, you know, honored any longer. That would be my policy as well. And I think, and I would ask you to take a look at how those presentations go, because today you went to the podium during the questions about the bill run. You asked 3 questions and you got no response, because it seems, I think, and it's coming across as a fishing expedition for a tax, and that ain't cool. And I noticed as you were talking, I heard Trustee Vosberg say, hey, I thought our board, she's right. You can't just grab somebody's name and start, you know, running them down with no, you know, constructive conclusion there. I mean, you can do it, but you can't expect to be treated with courtesy and respect when you don't offer it. It's very, very difficult. The last thing I want to say is along the lines of Trustee Anderson. I unfortunately have dealt with COVID in a way that I didn't expect to be dealing with it, and it's hit very, very close to home. It's a very rough time for a lot of people in this community who are really hurting, and keep them in your heart and keep them in your prayers. There's so much of it around us right now, and it's really a very somber Christmas season for me this year. I'm trying to stay positive, and I appreciate the sentiment that you put out and that we heard from a lot of members of our public. This is a great community, and I'm very privileged and honored to serve with people that we don't always agree, but you know, we have mutual respect on a very basic level, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you all.
Trustee Dumick.
Thank all the residents who came out tonight, especially everybody that was against the cannabis. I stated my position, which I've stated before, and we'll see where this goes with this board. There's 7 of us up here, and it's everybody's prerogative on their views and what they get from the public. So on that, I'd also like to, I agree with a lot of things David said and what Brad said last week. When people start attacking my department heads, I don't like it. You want to come at us? Fine. We took elected positions. When you start going after department heads, no. They didn't sign up for this. They're just doing a job, and they're doing a darn good job around here, our department heads. They put a lot of time and effort in. But I don't appreciate people attacking my department heads. Come on, at the 7 of us, we signed up for it. David and I have went boxing how many years up here now, Dave? You know? Dave and I disagree, we get agree, you know, but going after department heads, no, I don't go for that, and I stand behind the supervisor and his comments from last week. And with that, all the residents, I wish you the Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Stay safe. Hank, David, Cindy, Brad, Bob, Kathy, and Kathy, have a great holiday season, and we'll see you next year. I'm done.
Trustee Osberg, please.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just want to draw attention to for the board members here, we did receive a letter this afternoon from Jason Buchan, one of the pastors, one of the churches here in Chesterfield. We want to read that. He spoke out against the cannabis. And the other thing, there was a member of the public who used to work for the township but hasn't, and prefaced last board meeting that he no longer worked. I think some people didn't hear that part. So he was no longer an employee, but he'd never say that, so I'm telling you again. Now, everybody, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Thank you.
Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. There was a few comments tonight about family members suffering from addictions and things like that, and I don't believe that there is anybody who doesn't have a person in their family that they know or a friend who, it's one of those things that that hits every family. I have a sister who I've had issues with, and I've had to make some of the same decisions as one of the speakers had to make here. A father who was an alcoholic and other family members. I understand. I appreciate everybody's passion and in the things that they bring. I am a person who genuinely listens to people and tries to understand where they're coming from. And one of the things that is the most difficult thing about this job that I never expected was on Wednesday mornings when I come in to the office and an employee's name has been used, a lot of tissue. It's very intimidating. It hurts them. You know, you're doing a lot of it's going to be okay. You know, you kind of make jokes to try to break up the atmosphere, but they're like, why is my name being called out? Why am I just do this job. And to what Trustee Demink said, we chose that. You know, they just want to come and do their job. So Shelby Township had told me that in their board rules, they included part of their board rules to not use employee names, but they gave every employee a number. It was an idea, an interesting idea, interesting concept. We don't have that in our rules, but maybe I think what we're asking is just politely to be conscientious of that for the employees, and not to use their names so that they can do their job regardless of what happens at this board meeting verbally amongst other people. I appreciate the residents whenever they come out, and I appreciate if more residents would come out on a regular basis. I appreciate the one gentleman who talked about, am I the youngest person that was ever in this boardroom? And absolutely not. My kids have come, we've had other children come, and I have a daughter who was here with my granddaughter, and she says a lot of the same things as that gentleman and agrees with him a lot, and I appreciate his point of view and always am attentive, and I think we all are. So I'm sorry if there was any confusion there and for that particular speaker. This is Christmas week. And I do wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays and a Happy New Year. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. First and foremost, I would like to thank all of the members of the public who came out to speak their minds and opinions on all of our agenda items, but in particular the first one because being a member of that committee that has been again investigating and educating on this issue for the last 2.5 years. We've been asking for that for a long time, so thank you so much for coming out. I'd also like to thank them very much for their decorum. They were, for the most part, incredibly thoughtful, respectful, and they did it right. And for those who would like to involve themselves in the political discourse, that group did it right, and I want to thank them for that. I would recommend in the future, I know I don't appreciate, I should say, when people threaten us politically. When you take any issue of good governance and public policy and you drag it into a political environment, I think it cheapens it, it demoralizes it, and to suggest that someone is making a decision based on some political agenda isn't fair, and quite frankly, it's cheap. I wouldn't do that, and it doesn't serve you well either as far as its effectiveness. So as Trustee Joseph said, every one of us here, we may differ very, very much, and I think on this board in that particular issue, there's positions on every end of the spectrum and everywhere along it. And the reality is that all of us are interested in serving the public and making the best decision that we believe we can possibly make in the best interest of our community. And we may see things differently, and that's okay. But I don't believe any one of us is looking at this in a political lens, and quite frankly, I wouldn't want to be represented by someone who's making a decision based on how it's going to affect them politically. I would like them to make the best decision they feel they need to make based on their own conscience, and everyone should be voting their conscience, and I will respect that always. So I think that's the best that we can hope for from our elected officials, is that they vote their conscience, they make their best decision, may not agree with them, but at least we'll respect them for that. So thank you, though, because that group did it right, and many of them came from our religious community. We all have different missions, but I think we all have the same objective, and that is to do our very best to affect the public good and do right by each other. And at this time of the year, I think that that's the best that we can all do, is to be kind to each other, be respectful to each other, and love each other the best that we can. Wish everyone a very, very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. What I was going to say has already been said, so I want to direct just a few pointed comments. Mr. Speaka, you have my personal cell phone. You text me all the time. You don't need to go through my assistant. In fact, you've been in my office, and we've had conversations. So for you to stand at the podium again and mislead the public, shame on you. And I'm going to give you some compassion, because I'm not going to restate what has already been stated here tonight. I'm not an actor. In fact, I think I failed my high school acting class. I stand by what I said, and I mean what I said, particularly to the last board meeting. I'm going to take exception to comments again you made tonight. You made an inference of TVs, gaming, and possible improper conduct and gifts. That's an inference. That's an inference of misconduct by a public employee. And if you're so steadfast in that belief, I will text you, send you to the Michigan State Police, and you can make a complaint on whatever allegation you believe took place there. I authorize the TVs, as I do on every expense that goes through this township. Do not come to this board anymore, and I'm asking you, and attacking employees who are here doing their jobs, doing what they're supposed to do. Everybody stands at the podium again and gives their expertise. Your expertise to run a department, a water department. I'm trying to show some compassion again, but this is ridiculous. It really is, and I'll go back to my statements. As was said here tonight, can't we do this with decency and decorum? I don't want to argue and berate and belittle anyone. You have a respected opinion, and I respect it. But don't attack people because they're not what you believe. Don't stand at the podium and act as though you know how to run a water department or a police department, or you know what staffing levels should be or shouldn't be, or where they should be or the station should be or shouldn't be. That's not your expertise. As a resident, I respect what you have to say, and you have that ability to speak. But don't berate the employees or the position of this board when they choose to do something. Fund a police department, create a public safety department, all positive for this community. And again, I'm going too far because I told myself, show some compassion. I want to thank Attorney Siebert. Personally, professionally, what this guy did, what this attorney did for this township, trying to navigate something that's very difficult and problematic and facing every community here in our surroundings, and give the presentation tonight and try and create some clarity to what a growing discussion is going to come. This isn't going away. The state legalized it. And I know it's going to come back here. What your belief is, I appreciate. And many of us come from that law enforcement side where it's very difficult. It is very difficult. But again, Attorney Siebert, your presentation tonight was spot on. I appreciate it. And my last comment is, and we can parse it out however you want to argue it, and I'm sure it's going to be continued. A wise supervisor told me a long time ago, all money collected through this township, through taxes, fees, rates, whatever, belong to this township. They belong to improve the township. We are not the private sector. We are a government. Do we employ business practices to the best that we can? Yes. But our main goal is to provide services to the residents in the most cost-effective manner that we can, but also the most enhanced manner that we can. With that being said, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adjourned.